I think we're ready to get started, and I apologize for the delay. So, welcome to the Nampa City Council meeting this Monday night, October 3rd. We welcome everybody that's both in the audience and online. We do have a tradition, and that is that we open in prayer and the pledge. And Rick Hogaboam, my chief of staff, is going to open with the invocation this evening. Let's all stand.
Good evening. Yes, let's stand, and if you would, please join me as we pray. Let's pray together. Lord, we gather before you thankful for your faithfulness through the seasons. We thank you for fall and the celebration of harvest. We thank you for being a God who provides for our needs. We thank you, Lord, for the city of Nampa and all the people that it represents, and we know that you are a God who loves this city, who cares deeply for this city. We thank you for the public servants who are seated here tonight, the decisions that they have to make. We pray your wisdom and guidance over them. We pray your blessing over their family and the sacrifice of time that they make to be here serving. We thank you for all those who are gathered here tonight and all the business that they bring before the city. We pray, Lord, that ultimately your will would prevail, and we pray for your blessing to continue to rest upon this city. May the city of Nampa shine brightly in this community. We thank you also, Lord, for the organizations being acknowledged in the proclamations tonight and the work that they do. We know that this community is made up by many servants who do great work. And so we pray your blessing. We pray your Holy Spirit to continue to inspire and motivate your people into service for this community. We're only as good as we're willing to serve, so we pray your blessing in that regard. And we just lift this evening up to you in Jesus' name. Amen. Would you please join me in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Rick. So let's begin with roll call.
Rodriguez.
Here.
Bruner.
Here.
Ingula.
Here.
Reynolds.
Here.
Haverfield.
Here.
Bauer.
Here.
All present.
Thank you. So before we get started, we do have a couple proposed amendments to the agenda. We have one amendment that we will be adding a reconsideration. And would you like to explain that reconsideration now or at the time? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The City Clerk's Office is requesting to amend the agenda by adding an item that has some time sensitivity to it, as it is a reconsideration request. And there is an emergent need, as it was continued to the October 3rd agenda when it was heard on September 19th. I do want to, mention that it wasn't actually heard. It was listed on the agenda for September 19th to continue it to the October 3rd meeting, but due to a typographical omission, the item was not included on the October 3rd agenda. This item is a request for reconsideration of the annexation and zoning to RD Zoning District Development Agreement and Subdivision Preliminary Plat for Parker Estates Subdivision at 525 East Greenhurst Road. The applicant has been contacted, and what was in the council packet on September 19th has been distributed to the council members.
Thank you. So the other item that is not an amendment to the agenda exactly, we will vote to amend the agenda later. That is item 7.4. That is a public hearing. We will be asking for a motion to move that to the November 7 meeting. Other than that, I'm not aware of any other amendments to the agenda. Council, does anyone else have any proposed amendments? With that, I would stand for a motion to approve the amended agenda and consent agenda as proposed.
So moved.
Rodriguez.
Yes.
Bruner.
Yes.
Ingula.
Yes.
Bauer.
Yes.
Reynolds.
Yes.
Haverfield.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the opportunity for a member from the public to speak on an agenda or non-agenda item. Do we have anyone signed up this evening?
No, Madam Mayor.
Is there anyone in the audience that had intended to speak this evening on an agenda or non-agenda item? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to proclamations. We have 3 proclamations this evening, and we're going to start with National Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And as I read the agenda, Alyssa, feel free to come forward and you can speak at the conclusion. So, whereas domestic violence impacts women, men, and children of every age, background, and belief, and whereas nearly 1 in 4 women and 1 in 10 men in the United States have suffered severe physical violence by an intimate partner. Victims are deprived of their autonomy, their liberty, security, and they face tremendous threats to their health and safety. And whereas since November of 2005, the Nampa Family Justice Center has received 75,371 client visits, providing hope and services to adult and children suffering from abuse. And each year, there are more served than the previous. And whereas the Nampa Family Justice Center, one of the original 15 centers funded by the President's Family Justice Center Initiative of 2003, continues to mold its programming and services to provide the best services in one location for clients and to help them successfully maneuver through the justice system. And whereas the Nampa Family Justice Center rightfully prides itself on strong partnerships it has created within the community in collaboration between government and nonprofit organizations to provide coordinated services to women, men, and children suffering from family violence. And whereas it is fitting for the Nampa Family Justice Center to celebrate its 17th anniversary 1 month early to coincide with National Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Now, therefore, I, Debbie Kling, Mayor of the City of Nampa, Idaho, do hereby proclaim October 2022 as National Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And here to speak with us is Alyssa Groen.
First of all, I just want to say thank you, Mayor Kling, and thank you to each of our city council members. We at the Justice Center could not do what we're doing without your support. Secondly, I want to say domestic violence is a community matter. So children that grow up in a home where there is violence, they often become a perpetrator or a victim as an adult. So it's so important that we step in and intervene and stop that cycle of violence that we often see at the Justice Center. We see moms coming in and then their children coming in, and we see a generation of violence that is continuing. And so I would challenge you as a community member that we educate and we speak out about violence. At the Justice Center, our mission is to promote safety, self-sufficiency, and hope and healing to those affected by abuse. And so in order to stop that cycle of violence, we have to intervene. And so I would challenge you today that we not only promote today or this month, October, as Domestic Violence Awareness Month, but that we also every day promote those healthy relationships and living in a community free of violence. And so, you know, if you know of anyone or you have an opportunity, please send them to the Justice Center, because we have seen lives changed, and we are committed to Nampa to changing and breaking that cycle of violence. So thank you so much for your support.
Alyssa, thank you. Council, does anyone have any questions? Here's your proclamation. There you go. Thank you so much. I do want to say we are extremely blessed to have the team that we have at the Nampa Family Justice Center that serve not only with wonderful skill set, but also with passion. And they're so committed. And we so value you guys. And thank you for the work that you do. It's not easy work, but thank you so much. It's appreciated. So the next proclamation we have this evening is on Safe Infant Sleep Awareness Month. So, and then at the conclusion, we'll have Bart Buckendorf and Jesse Mitchell come forward with Safe Start. Whereas sudden unexpected infant deaths is the sudden and unexpected death of an infant birth to age 1, in which the manner and cause of death are not immediately obvious prior to investigation. And whereas sudden infant death syndrome is a subset of the sudden unexpected infant deaths and remains the #1 cause of infant death between the age of 28 days of life to 1 year. And whereas the tragedy can happen to any family, regardless of race, ethnicity, or economic group. And whereas evidence-based research has proven that when babies are placed in a crib alone, in the parent's room, on their backs, on a firm mattress, with a fitted crib sheet, using no crib bumper pads, pillows, blankets, quilts, or stuffed animals or toys, in a smoke-free environment, they will sleep the safest and reduce the risk of SIDS and prevent many other infant sleep-related deaths. And whereas Northwest Infant Survival and SIDS Alliance is a statewide, not-for-profit organization dedicated to providing infant-safe sleep education, bereavement support services, and creating community awareness around preventing sleep-related infant deaths. And whereas during the month of October, the Northwest Infant Survival and SIDS Alliance will hold special events, including Run for the Angels, and a distribution of safe infant sleep educational pamphlets, cribs, and wearable blankets to families in need, therefore providing the best opportunity for all babies in Nampa to survive and thrive. Now, therefore, I, Debbie Kling, Mayor of the City of Nampa, do hereby proclaim October 2022 as Safe Infant Sleep Awareness Month, in order to raise awareness about preventing sleep-related infant deaths and to encourage infants' safe sleep practices so that no parent will have to endure the tragedy of the death of a baby. So Bart and Jesse, are you here? Hi, come on forward. Thank you. Okay, well, Bart, tell us about yourself, what you do, and then I'd like to give you this proclamation. But
Yes, I'm Bart Buckendorf. I was with Ada County Paramedics for 35 years. So I did see several of these infant deaths over that time, and I was suspicious that some of these were accidental suffocations. And that's what we're finding out. The American Academy of Pediatrics has these recommendations because of that. We believe 90% of these infant deaths are preventable by, number one, not putting the baby in an adult bed or a couch. They should be alone on their back in a crib. And we have that on many, I think about 24 ambulances in Ada County, and I think 3 over here in Canyon County. We're also working on a class for first responders just to help keep these unfortunate infant death scenes as clean as possible for the investigators, so they're just not labeling everything SIDS, because it's not a sudden infant death syndrome. It is very suspicious of being accidental suffocation, strangulation, just smothering, that kind of a thing. And we have a class for high schoolers that we'd love to get across the whole state. I've been trying to get into high schools with this class, just haven't had any success yet. So if anybody had any help in helping us getting into a high school with a safe infant sleep classes, that'd be great.
thank you. We need to help you with that. Thank you so much for your passion, and I see that it's born out of a life of service.
You bet.
So thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Here you go. Thank you for taking your time this evening.
You bet.
Okay.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you. All of these are so important. And so our last proclamation this evening is National Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month. Needless to say, this is a month that we are proclaiming as a very important month related to some very challenging issues in life. So whereas in 1988, President Ronald Reagan proclaimed October as National Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month, and whereas churches, ministries, and other nonprofit organizations comfort grieving parents who have experienced the death of a child during pregnancy or through early childhood. And whereas many of these parents live in, deliver in, have a child die in, and bury a child in our community. And David's Hope Pregnancy Loss Ministry was founded to support parents whose child or children have died from miscarriage, ectopic pregnancy, molar pregnancy, stillbirth, neonatal death, sudden unexplained death of a child, sudden infant death syndrome, birth defects, illness, accidents, and other types of infant and early childhood death. And whereas bereaved parents around the world remember their child annually on October 15th with a candle lighting at 7 p.m. Some will remember their child or children in their homes, while others will remember them in small gatherings across the state, across the nation, or around the world. Whereas this remembrance and awareness would unify these parents and the community in tribute to their children. And whereas in honor of the thousands of children that die each year in Idaho, David's Hope Pregnancy Loss Ministry requests that October 15th, 2022 be recognized as Pregnancy and Infant Loss Remembrance Day. So I, Debbie Kling, Mayor of the City of Nampa, do hereby proclaim October 15th and October 2022 as National Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month in order to raise the awareness about preventing sleep-related infant deaths, to encourage safe sleep practices, and to ensure that no parent will have to endure or that we support them when they experience the tragedy of the death of a baby. So coming to speak with us, hi Randy. And is Lynette here this evening? She is, yes. Hi, oh, there you are, right in front of me.
Mayor Kling and Nampa City Council, thank you for this proclamation this evening and for your continued support for the pregnancy and infant loss community. It has been said that no parent should ever have to bury their child, and I can tell you it's one of the most devastating things you will ever have to experience. Hopefully none of you ever have. So we're grateful for the support. 1 in 4 pregnancies ends in miscarriage, and that's not including the 25,000 or more in stillbirth or the many thousands in early infant death. And when my wife and I went through miscarriage the first and second time, it felt like you are alone, like there's nobody there. Nobody understands. So to have a community to come alongside of families who've lost babies in the womb and early infant death is extremely pivotal in the healing process. We are extremely grateful for all you've done, and we are extremely grateful again for you guys have in the past put the Pregnancy and Infant Loss Memorial in Kohler Lawn Cemetery, and we're still very grateful for that as well. I would invite all of you and everyone watching the feed or in the room. October 15th is, as Mayor Kling noted, is Pregnancy and Infant Loss Remembrance Day. We have a candlelight vigil that night at Kohler Lawn Cemetery at the Pregnancy and Infant Loss Memorial that the city has so graciously provided for us. And that's at 6:30 on October 15th, and we would invite anyone to come to that as well. Mayor and Nampa City, thank you so much for your continued support.
Thank you. There you go. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you.
Thanks, Randy.
That concludes our proclamations this evening. You know, the next agenda item is staff communications, but what I'd like to do is shift over to business items 1 and 2, and then come back to staff communications, because we have a few people here that rather than having them set for 30 minutes, we'll go ahead and move. And so I'd like to move to action item 6.1, which is the Nampa Fire Department that's here to request approval for the Nampa Fire Department to support Muscular Dystrophy Association with the annual Fill the Boot Drive on October 8th from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the intersection of Northside Boulevard and Caldwell Boulevard. Come on up. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, I appreciate you all for having me, Mayor and council members. You probably recognize this boot. For years, can everyone hear me? For years, we walk the streets and we collect critical funds for the Muscular Dystrophy Association with the goal of helping those in need. Firefighters are very giving people, and we live in a great community that's also very giving and willing to donate funds to us and the organization that we're representing. The Muscular Dystrophy Association is an organization that supports the research, data collection, medications for people suffering with neuromuscular diseases. They also support, unfortunately, tonight, I wanted to have a family here that's been recipients of some of these funds, but they support sending kids with neuromuscular diseases to camps and different things to give these people experiences that they normally wouldn't be able to have without the funds raised by our efforts and the efforts of the community. And so tonight, like I said, it's been 3 years since we've been able to do this, and we're very excited for the opportunity to get out there again and do this, and we're asking for you to allow us to be able to work that intersection this Saturday, October 8th, from the hours of 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. And, yeah,
That you'll stand for any questions. How's that?
exactly. That sounds great.
Council, do you have any questions?
Mayor, just
comments?
curious, it's been 3 years. What do you normally raise on an average? Have
So-
you kept some stats?
I looked at the numbers before I came, and in 2019, we raised over $20,000 through these efforts. And this partnership between the International Association of Firefighters and the Muscular Dystrophy Association has been around for about 70 years. And they've raised almost $700 million through this effort. There's been 12 new medications that have come along during that timeline to help prolong the lives of these people and make their lives better. So it's a significant benefit to the people in need.
And Mayor, I'm totally in favor of this, and what a tradition and so on. Something that a little negative, and sometimes it gives people reason. Not tonight, but at a future time, though, I would like to discuss as far as those who do not have this tradition for MDA or whatever, but who are just holding up signs and panhandling on the streets. So that's something at another time. But for this, there's always exceptions, and this is a traditional exception. It's wonderful. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Do you want to go ahead? Say that again?
I'll make the motion to approve this request.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Other than thank you, we so appreciate you guys and the work. you
Appreciate
do.
you.
Thank you.
We'll see you on Saturday.
Okay, roll call.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Brunner,
By all means, yes.
Chingula,
Yes.
Bauer,
Yes.
Reynolds,
Yes.
Haverfield.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to do 6.2 on the agenda, and I'm sorry I don't have that in front of me. So this is a request for reconsideration that was carried forward to tonight's meeting. And this is a request for reconsideration of the annexation and zoning to the Parker Estates subdivision at 525 East Greenhurst Road for Darren Taylor, subdivision maker LLC, representing Left, Right, Center. So at this time, I would like to defer to legal to guide us through this discussion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members. So as you know, a request for reconsideration is not a review of the merits at this time, but a decision on whether to rehear and reconsider the previous decision. And it's simply based on the request that was submitted. Mayor, my suggestion and advice to the council is that you grant the request for reconsideration. I think they raise a legitimate question, and it would be appropriate to grant that request.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Roll call.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Brunner,
Yes.
Chingula,
Yes.
Bauer,
Yes.
Reynolds,
Yes.
Haverfield.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, we will go back so that they didn't have to wait through this next 30 minutes. So we do not have, as an FYI, any agency or commission reports, but we do have staff communications this evening. And we're going to have a presentation on the state highway. And go ahead, Claire, come on forward, or whoever's starting. The planning and the environmental linkage study, the Pell Grant. And I tell you, this project's been in the works for, I'll let you tell us how long, but for many years. And it's exciting that we actually are coming, I think, somewhat to the end. But Claire, thank you for joining us tonight. And Mark also.
You are most welcome. I've got to reload here. I was sitting back there and my computer went into sleep mode.
And as just a quick note, this is staff communications. It is not an action item. We will be, they're just really looking for input, and then he'll tell us the next step that we'll be going through.
Come on, sweetheart. There we go. My name is Claire Bowman. I work as a transportation planner for the city. I began looking with assistance from the council and from the Nampa Redevelopment Corporation 13 years ago at how to fix some of the problems in downtown traffic. We've come up with a number of studies. This one appears to be the most robust and the most likely to lead to some implementable solutions. I caution you, however, before I start, that it is a planning study. You will see some alignments here tonight that may affect individuals along the routes. The actual routes are not shown in these graphics. They would be determined later. This is the first half of a two-part study. Planning and environmental linkages, we're doing the planning part. The environmental linkages will be done by Mark with the budget that you have approved for your FY23 budget to look at all the environmental concerns and the specific alignment details for it. So with that background, let me get over here and share a screen. Oops, I gotta share first, there we go. I used to be reasonably knowledgeable about tech things. The world has caught up with me.
Don't worry, Claire, we're not far behind you.
This, go there. Yes. Do it with my fingers and maybe it'll work better. Okay. This study is called, as the mayor correctly noted, State Highway 45 Planning and Environmental Linkages Study. We began it 18 months ago with 20-some options for consideration. It was all of the options that were considered in the previous studies, plus a few new ones that the current Horrocks engineers staff added to it, along with some city staff. We went through a screening of are there any fatal flaws in any of them. We eliminated those that had that fatal flaw problem. We then went through what we called a level 2 screening, which included a number of staff from the city, a number of private individuals who had been participants in some of the public meetings we held and volunteered to participate. After that, we ended up with 4 options. My reason for being here this evening is that we're on the cusp of taking those 4 options back to a 3rd level screening, at which time we hope to get to 1 option. The purpose that you see up here is where we started this process: address deficiencies, prepare for growth, increase freight mobility, hopefully around, out of downtown instead of in it, and provide a range of options for roadway users. One of the things I want to share with you first is a technical engineering graphic. The top one is what we would dream about as the typical section wherever we align a roadway. However, we're not going to build a new road. All we're going to do is fit it somewhere in the existing system, hopefully at a more convenient and more adaptable location. So this typical section at the top will be modified and squeezed and adjusted as we try to fit in and minimize impacts to businesses and homes along the way. The lower one is something we want to pay a lot of attention to. When you realign a highway, you end up with some roads that are currently part of the highway that are no longer part of the highway. You will have lots of users out of habit who continue to try to use them. What we want to do is take whatever those segments are and downgrade them to a 2-lane roadway instead of a current 4 or 5-lane roadway. Those are some options for ways that that would be done. Then we have 4 options that we're still looking at. Let me start with an explanation of the keys on here. The graphic you see at the left that points down to the 12th Avenue and Roosevelt intersection shows a little bit of what we would anticipate that intersection to look like. Again, this is planning level things. We have not done any engineering, no serious looks at it. The one on the upper right-hand corner is a far more difficult problem. The railroad overpass over Garrity between Sugar and 16th. If we use 16th Street or 16th Avenue at all for the revised alignment, that overpass of the railroad has to be reconstructed. It's already the subject of a roadway safety audit that we did a few years ago, and it must be fixed. The lower right corner shows what the intersection of Roosevelt and 16th Avenue would look like. The red circle with the box that says additional study required, you will see this on every one of these graphics. Depending on which alignment we choose, the fix at Garrity, 11th, and Franklin will be different. So we have not included any of the specifics in there. We've not done anything with the costs that you will see later on. This option brings folks in 12th Avenue, connects to Roosevelt, and uses 16th Avenue to go on out to Garrity. And we would then split at Garrity and go some to Franklin, some to the Garrity interchange. There is a second option using 16th Avenue. This one goes all the way down to 7th Street South, uses 7th Street South as the cut across, and then 16th Avenue across the railroad tracks and to the north, the same way as the other one. Different set of graphics here except for the railroad overpass that would have to be adjusted. There was one thing I wanted to point out on that one yet. You see the greenish colored alignment on there that involves both 12th Avenue and portions of 11th Avenue South. Those are the kinds of places that we would want to downgrade the existing 4-lane in some places, give drivers visual cues, if you will, that the alignments have changed, that the roadways have changed. Then we switch to the existing alignment of 12th Avenue, connecting it to 11th Avenue in a new way. This one uses a cut across somewhere between 3rd and 6th Streets South. You see the graphic on the left shows it between 4th and 6th, I think. Yeah, as that kind of a cut across, but the specific alignment, again, has not been chosen. What this one entails is returning the block of 11th Avenue South between 2nd and 3rd Streets South to two-way traffic. The original decision to make it one-way traffic was because of some concerns a dozen years ago that two-way traffic on that block would hinder access to the parking garage. I think all of those concerns have evaporated over the years. We're now seriously thinking about making that section of 11th Avenue two-way street again. This one requires that to be done for this option. In this case, you're going out the existing 11th Avenue to the Garrity-Franklin 11th Avenue intersection, which again would have to be redone. The fourth option that we are still looking at takes 12th Avenue Road, essentially, and runs it through, not quite straight through, but it gets it to 11th Avenue, clear down by the Hasbrook House. Hasbrook House is an historical feature that we have to avoid. Federal rules require that. So we know that one up front. There may be some other things in here that we have to worry about environmentally, but we know that one. So this alignment, as you see in the upper left graphic, kind of slants across, misses the Hasbrook House, then takes 11th Avenue. It also requires the block between 2nd Street and 3rd Street South to become a two-way street again. Those are the four options we're looking at. I think I might pause for questions before I go into some of the summary information.
Claire, thank you. Are there any questions? Councilman Haverfield?
So there's no bridge work necessary as far as with options 3 and 4, correct?
Correct.
Options 1 and 2 would require quite a bit of bridge work as far as on
Yes.
16th.
You'll see some of that in the cost figures when I get there, Councilman.
I have personal preferences, but I'll hold my thoughts, listening to the rest of the council.
Okay. And he will go into the next piece in just a second. But Councilman Bauer, do you have a comment at this time? Still listening? Okay. Let's go ahead and move on to the next
All right.
piece. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Victor. I couldn't see you over there.
That's okay.
I apologize.
Claire, I've always thought maybe that we could adjust the 12th Avenue curve and make it a little bit straighter. Is this in your plan at all? Because I think we're wasting space by keeping it such a wide angle curve. Does this have it in, do you have that in your proposal here?
Yep.
What does this, what does it do?
Come on. Bouncing all over the place here. Well, I'm sorry, I do not understand. Come back into it.
No, I'll tell you what
Well-
I'm thinking while you're,
I'm trying to get to the crossover image, but it is not cooperating right now. That's weird.
Go ahead, Councilman, and share what your thoughts
oh,
are.
okay. Do you,
Well,
do you,
I can tell you, the direct answer, Councilman, is that yes. If we were to take 12th Avenue Road and connect it to 11th, which is kind of the one that's flashing on the screen right now, you would solve that problem. 12th Avenue would have to be, 12th Avenue South would have to be connected into that in a different way than it is currently.
that,
If you're using 11th Avenue down by 2nd and 3rd Streets for that little crossover that was in the previous graphic, then yes, we anticipate the curve at 12th Avenue Road to 12th Avenue South would have to be modified. And it would be raised from a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit curve to at least a 35, which is what the
Oh,
rest
really?
of the design would be.
yeah.
Okay. Let's try it.
So where we're going to go next is that Claire's going to share some numbers that will be beneficial. So as he reopens.
Oh, interesting. And we'll go there and there. Steady. Thank you, Mark. You're the techie in this group, not me.
Well, I think that's probably a pretty good location for that. I just was
Okay.
wondering if it's a safety issue that that's going to be easily taken care of if we do that.
Well, you have a resident business on the outside of that corner that has placed large boulders there because in my personal experience, there have been 4 times cars have ended up in his lawn, one of which went all the way into the building.
Yeah, right.
So it's a hazard and needs to be fixed. This is the example where it would have to be modified to allow for a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, this is an engineer's graphic. All you need to pay attention to is the far right-hand column, the one that's highlighted out there. We're comparing a baseline. The upper set of tables is for the morning commute. The lower set of tables is for the afternoon commute. So we're looking at all the ways that vehicles get delayed, either because of heavy traffic that slows them down, or because they're stopped at the intersection, or because there's so much traffic that the speeds reduce. We looked at 2050. So the far right number on the baseline AM is 100%. That's what we're comparing to. If you look at the 16th Avenue via Roosevelt, it's even worse in 2050 than doing nothing today. That's what that tells you. The other 3 are all better by differing amounts. For the afternoon commute, again, you have 100% for the baseline. The 16th Avenue via Roosevelt is now far, far worse than doing nothing. My guess is that one won't make it through to the final selection. And then you have the other 3 all improve over that. So the characteristics you asked about the other day show that at least 3 of these options improve the overall flow and feel of driving through this. This doesn't pay any attention to what the businesses will experience around the library, what the library will experience, or anything like that. It's simply saying the feel of driving will improve with any one of those 3 over what the 2050 would be without any of those improvements. Then we get to cost estimates. These are very initial. They are based on a whole lot of assumptions. They do not include any dollar amounts for fixing or modifying the Franklin, Garrity, and 11th Avenue North intersection, but they are based on common assumptions across all 4 of them. So what you see is that the 2 options using 16th Avenue are the most expensive. If you're interested in the details, this will be available. This whole presentation will be available later. It is the 2 on 11th Avenue and 12th Avenue that have the lowest estimated cost right now.
Mayor, can I ask a quick question? So options 1 and 2 also contribute more traffic to Garrity, correct?
The 16th Avenue options, yes. The first, I apologize, I put the slides in the order of both of the 16th Avenue and then both of the 12th Avenue options. The folks who prepared this slide put them in a different order. So I want to be sure we're talking about the same one. The 2 16th Avenue options add significant traffic to Garrity.
Right.
And
So
yes,
the other 2 options then directs traffic more towards, if it's beet truck traffic, it would be more towards the sugar beet processing plant, as the others would have to go down Garrity, get back on and come back.
Franklin, for most vehicles, Franklin access to the interstate would increase. That's where the likely increase in traffic would go instead of out Garrity.
Okay. I'll let you keep going, and then we'll come back.
Okay,
Wrap up.
I'm
You're
finished
there.
on the presentation.
Okay.
I didn't know if anyone would be online or anyone here in the audience who might want to contact us. We talked about, with Amy earlier today, about offering the mayor email, and mine is on there as well. If folks have questions or want to pursue, I'm happy to talk with people. Would enjoy meeting you in person if we can do that. I just like that kind of interaction with folks.
Mayor,
That's great.
can we get this sent to us?
Absolutely.
If you could email that to
I
us,
will,
that'd be
I
great.
will send it to Shar after the meeting's over this evening.
Thank you.
I'm sorry if you normally expect things in your packet. I needed to make a bit of explanation about focusing in on the fact this is a planning study, not a roadway alignment selection study. That you'll get many opportunities with Mark's help to look at that over the next 12 to 15 months.
And Claire, my understanding is you're going to be continuing to do some outreach to, is there a smaller group you're going to be reaching out to with these 4 recommendations or options?
We'll
Is that
have
correct?
about, the answer, short answer is yes. You get a clear answer, which is all the explanation for it. We have about 30 people who will be asked to look at various characteristics of these 4 options and make their recommendations on them. That includes, again, about a half dozen general citizens. It includes engineers from the city. It includes planners from the city, things like that. And it will include all the city council members as well this time.
So what the city council has the privilege tonight of having Claire here to show it to us in person, to answer any questions, and then you'll have the opportunity to give input directly into the process with Claire or however you work that. So will you be reaching out to them and they'll
Yes.
have a process in which they can provide input?
I will be doing that by email so that everyone who gets one of these gets exactly the same instructions. But again, those of you whom I know that if you call me, I'll help out.
You'll answer your phone. Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Mayor, if I may, so if all goes well, Claire, are we looking at this maybe coming before this body within 15, 18 months? Is that what I'm hearing?
This piece of it,
I'm talking about final decisions, on a final decision being made of one of these options.
let me hesitate a little bit on the definition of final, Councilman. This planning and environmental linkages study will have its final alignment generally selected by December, and council will get to weigh in on that. Then the NEPA portion, the environmental portion, proceeds. There's still a chance that there will be some fatal flaw in the alignment that we bring to council in December that will cause us to go back and relook at either modifications of it or some perturbation that takes a slightly different alignment or something like that to miss an historical artifact or an environmental justice location or something like that. So then there will be a final that includes environmental approval. And at that point, you have a design that's probably, 40, 50% complete, something like that. Yeah.
We'll vote
Right.
on the final, but you will ask for recommendations on this initial alignment. And then as far as the environmental linkages study, that piece, how long is that process?
Yeah,
Study?
You want to take that one?
Yeah, I would anticipate, there's a lot of challenges with the environmental, but I would anticipate probably about 24 months.
Okay, so that's where the
project.
time comes in.
Yeah, so that's when the, EP, environmental,
NEPA.
feds
Yeah.
get involved in that.
So we're a good 2 years out, 2 years plus, before we have an actual recommendation for how to proceed, or that we can proceed and then go after grants. Because we could go after a grant after that study is done, is that correct?
We'd probably, before it's done, we'd be actually.
So Mayor, we have a commitment from Claire that he'll be here to the end, right?
Well, we stood on that one.
Yeah. Are there
Okay.
any other questions for Claire? Seeing none. Claire, thank you. Great job. Really appreciate your work on this.
You're most welcome. I haven't been in front of the council for many years. I was telling Mark that it must have been 5 or 6 years. But I recognize a couple of you still. Good group. I love working in this city. It's just fun.
Well, we've appreciated you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Claire. So that concludes the staff report. And at this time, I'd like to go to, I believe it is 8.1 on our agenda. This is the remaining action that we have tonight outside of public hearings. This is unfinished business. This is an action item, and this is the first reading of ordinance for the development agreement modification, subdivision preliminary plat, and planned unit development for Cherry Grove subdivision, and rescinding a 2008 addendum outlining sewer requirements at that time on a property on Elm Drive. This is for Reuben J. and Sarah Azamondi. And I'll let you go ahead and read, and this is requested to pass under suspension of rules.
An ordinance of the City of Nampa, Idaho, approving the amended and restated development agreement with KB Home Idaho LLC, an Idaho limited liability company, modifying the development agreement contained in Nampa City ordinances 3684 and 3783 to replace, amend, and restate the previous agreement to replace the site plan, increase density, and provide conditions of approval, providing for an effective date, providing for severability, and repealing all ordinances, resolutions, orders, and parts thereof in conflict herewith.
Make a motion to pass the ordinance as read under suspension of rules.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion or any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Rodriguez.
Yes.
Brunner.
Yes.
Kingula.
Yes.
Bauer. Reynolds.
Yes.
Haverfield.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Okay, so we've got about 2 minutes until 6:30. You're wait, okay, so this is the first item. I just want to see if I think they are here. So we're going to pause for literally 1.5 minutes, and then we are going to start yeah, we will wait and start right at 6:30. So, council, you have about 1 minute to pause and take a deep breath, to pause, yes.
How many wells have gone dry in the Canyon County area in the last 5 years? Okay, all these new people moving in here, that's fine, I don't care. But where are we gonna get the water? Because I know there's been a bunch of wells go dry. Now, that's a question for you to think about. That's a good one to think about. You better think long and hard, because we're in the high desert, you know. I said my piece. Look at this, I'm coming in. Oh, God. Oh, you're so kind. Yeah, thank you. It's done. The letter, or THE, the letter's gonna say, Kirby 92 on the block. That's it.
Okay, council, I think we're ready to get going. Thank you, thank you, yeah, thank you. Okay, city council, I think we're ready to get going. And Rick, could you see if our clerk is, there we go, okay. So I think we're ready to get going. So with that, this first public hearing, 7-1 on the agenda, is an action item, and this is a variance of Code 10-19-8, requiring parking of vehicles to be set back 20 feet from the right-of-way. And then 1033-4C3, requiring a 15-foot landscape buffer along the property fronting the right-of-way. And 10-33-4E, requiring all trees in the right-of-way be deciduous in order to pave an existing gravel parking lot for vehicle sales at the inventory of Tom Scott Motors dealership at 09th Avenue North. And this is in a light industrial zoning district and at 912 7th Street North in the community business zoning district. It's totaling 1.27 acres. And this is for Connie Runya, representing Gunner Properties, LLC. Hi, Connie.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
My name is Connie Runya. I'm an attorney here in Nampa. My office is in the historic Nampa Library Building, which, by the way, thank you for making that project underway. I'm really enjoying my spot there. This is the third time I've been in front of you on behalf of Gunner Properties. The first time was a sign variance. The second time was a parking lot a little over a year ago. This is a very similar project to the parking lot project that we did about a year ago. When we submitted this application for a variance, to be completely frank, I was a little surprised that it didn't just sail through because I had learned so much about the first time we'd done this on another parking lot project. But I have Dick Scott is here and his manager Craig Collins, as well as Kurt Smith, the engineer. Kurt has done up the drawings for this. Basically, it is a garage, a gravel parking lot, creates a lot of dust and kind of tracking onto the road. The idea is to pave that, which includes water management, and then also create an entrance that's much safer access for the overflow on the new car arrivals. So in saying that, one of the challenges, and I think you'll see that in the staff report, I believe it's item 1 that talks about something that's, kind of creates a hardship. From our perspective, the hardship is losing a lot of parking spaces if we have to comply with the full setback requirements, the 20-foot on the light industrial next to residential. There are 2 residences immediately across the street from the parking lot on 7th. But also there are 10 trees there, 10 really nice coniferous trees all along that street and all along spaced out. And you can see that in your overview of that. Rod, I don't know if you have that closer picture that we've been looking at, but you can see, yes, you can see the little blue line runs right through those trees there. There's also some photographs in the staff report of those trees showing that it's really a low maintenance kind of underneath there, like bark and rocks underneath there, kind of a low water use area. And so our hope is to save those trees. If we are literally comply with the applicable ordinances, we would have to move back significantly from that. And so, in that regard, I'd ask you to consider this particular street. And one of the reasons why I thought this was a variance application that would just breeze through is the fact that 7th has already been partially vacated, that little block there between 10th and I think it's 11th. That's already part of a parking lot for both dealerships that are there. And then it ends in kind of an elbow. So it's really 2-3 blocks of just a not a very well-traveled street. Last time we were talking about 6th, and that was deemed to be a collector, and I understand a lot of that's changed since the last time we did that. So I did want to point out the street is, you know, it doesn't have the traffic that, that 6th did when we did our prior application. But the real thing is, if we can figure out a way to do this in a way that addresses staff's concerns as articulated in the staff report and preserve those mature trees, I'd like to be able to do that. And I think that's Dick Scott's, as the owner, I think that's his inclination as well, as if we could, as a city of trees, as staff pointed out in their report, if we could find a way to do that. So I had a few proposals of maybe things that we could, if you're willing to consider a way to accomplish this without having to take those trees out, I'd like to, and Rod and I have talked about these things in advance. He very generously gave me an hour of his time the other day, and I appreciated that. But one of the ideas would be, a concern in the staff report was that it's forever. A variance is forever. And it sounds like kind of a bad country song, but a variance, if we would agree to sunset that. So if Mr. Scott ever sold that property, which would open it up to different kind of development, we could agree to sunset that variance if you're inclined to grant us that. I also had Kurt Smith do a drawing here. If you look along the bottom edge there of it, you can see 7th running at kind of it looks diagonal in the drawing. Yes, thank you, Rod. To do the setback and move the entrance to the middle portion, that's right there, we would take out all of those trees and then create those landscape buffers on either side of the setback. And that's kind of what a revised drawing would look like that if we were to strictly comply with the ordinance. I'm here to ask if there's some way we can save these trees. So I'm going to keep my comments really short. We're all here to answer whatever questions you have. And Rod has supplied, that's a good close-up. You can see the 10 trees along there. This would also require, by the way, I neglected to say this. I see this on the drawing, but where the sidewalk is to be positioned, if we were to save the trees, the sidewalk we understand, would have to run against the curb and be of the appropriate width. And we think we can accomplish that with some trimming of the trees would be required, because the branches they're not, we'd have to lift them up a little bit. But we think we can accomplish that, and it would be consistent with the prior property. The sidewalk is right along the curb. It would just kind of continue to flow. So, but if you have any questions or comments, we'd like to be able to accomplish this. I think it'd be a really good improvement for that neighborhood, moving from gravel to paved, and I'd appreciate your consideration. But we can stand for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Connie. Council, do you have any questions at this time? Yes.
Just one. In one of the pictures, it appears that there's some overhead power lines, but they're not running down 7th Street, are they?
It could be in the alley, sir, running perpendicular to 7th.
Perpendicular up where the vacated road was, or vacated road section, is that what you?
So, Councilman Haverfield, we can't talk out into the audience. What we would have you do is come forward and speak in the microphone.
There you go.
Yes, yes.
Well, I might be able to be helpful in this. I'm kind of orienting myself to the picture.
So my question really
Yes.
comes down to, well, the picture that we just saw, there was overhead power. There's no overhead power lines over these conifer trees, are there?
Correct.
Okay, that was my
Correct.
question.
And it's appropriate that you ask that question also, in the sense that those power lines run right in the way of the prior entrance, or the existing entrance, and it's solving that. That is why the plan was to move the entrance to the center of that row of trees. It'll require taking one of the trees out by our calculation
But,
So the graphic that you gave us on the screen, the site plan with the relocated entry, it wasn't, I didn't see that in our packet, but did you say that your intent is to leave as many of the conifers as possible or to remove them as a part of this concept?
If we are required to comply with the ordinance in its literal terms, all of the trees will have to be removed. If the plan that Kurt originally submitted to planning anticipated moving the entrance to the center and retaining as many of the trees as possible, we think we've got it down to one tree removed. Does that answer your
Yeah,
question?
I'll wait for the staff then to give us information as far as on the vegetation question. Thank you.
thank you. Are there any other questions? Councilman Rodriguez, did you have anything?
No, ma'am, I didn't.
No, okay. Any other questions at this time? Okay, so Connie, as you know, we will have you back.
Sounds
So,
good.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Madam Mayor and Council, Rodney Ashby for the record, Planning and Zoning Director. We have covered a lot of what I was going to cover already, but I will try to hit some main points here. These are the criteria. These are all in your staff report. I actually tried to use this first one and say, of course, you can't call a financial hardship a valid hardship for a variance. And so I didn't go that direction, but I did say that there are some mature trees that seem to try to get at the desire to create a buffer between residential and this parking lot. And just the existence of those trees, maybe those are mature trees, they create that hardship. And getting rid of that would be inconsistent with the code's intentions, perhaps. The second one there are extraordinary site characteristics applicable to the property, and I just, again, pointed to those mature trees. The third one there, literal interpretation and enforcement of the regulation would deprive the applicants of privileges enjoyed by owners of the other properties in the same zoning district. I couldn't see this one. If any other properties in the area were to develop, they would be required to meet our current standards. So they would be required to have that setback. They would be required to not put these evergreens in the right of way, and they'd have to have that landscape buffer. And so I couldn't see how that one applied. And then the fourth one there, it will not constitute a grant of special privilege. Again, very similar to the last one. If others are going to develop, they would be required to do all these things. So if we grant this variance, staff's perspective here is that this could create a precedent. And then the last one, I couldn't see any concerns about public health or safety. So again, these are the criteria you need to use to determine whether we grant this variance or not. Comprehensive plan, real quickly, high density residential, and it's actually quite a few different things. Medium density residential in the bottom right-hand corner of that property. And then high density on the most of it, and then to the north there, northeast, is commercial. The zoning, oh, you can see that a little clearer there. So the zoning is IL and BC. So a little bit funny shaped. I'm not sure how this happened over time, but it did. To the north is BC zoning. Idaho Farmway Inc. is the owner. Martin Auto Wholesale, and this is based on a Google Street View. RB Supply, building materials. The property appears to be selling used vehicles, RVs, sheds, and storage of building materials. To the east and northwest is IL zoning. We've got Otter Self-Storage and Tom Scott Office and Vehicle Sales. To the southeast is BC zoning. That's Tom Scott Gunner Properties. It's a cinder block building with roll-up doors and a metal storage building. I pointed that out just because even though it's BC, it kind of fits with this industrial type feel. And they are primarily an industrially zoned property. And then west is the RS6 zoning and single-family homes just across the street. Public utilities appear, it appears that water and pressurized irrigation are available to the property, and sewer is located on 10th Avenue North. So there's the utility map there. And all public services are available and present on this property. So I forgot to just say that, again, the staff recommendation was denial because of those two criteria not being met. And it's based on those criteria only. So history, it is operated as a gravel parking lot for Tom Scott Auto Inventory. And here are some of those pictures we already kind of walked through. Let me just go through them kind of quickly. And it's pretty clear that the power lines you're seeing there are just to the southeast of this property. And so they're not crossing over into this property here. Those are the mature trees. Okay, so here's all the applicable regulations. I think we can kind of skip over most of this. You know that there's a landscape requirement and a setback for the parking, and that they can't be deciduous. Or sorry, they must be deciduous. I had to relook at that. Okay, that's the setback requirement. These are the variance criteria. We've talked about these lots of times. The only comments I received were from Nampa Building Department, and they said they have to follow Title IV, but in this case, they're not building any buildings, so it doesn't really apply here. I looked through the comprehensive plan and tried to find anything that would be applicable to this. And this is the only thing I could find. The transition from residential to commercial will include well-designed landscaping with building orientations that preserve a quiet residential neighborhood setting. And then just talking about that transition between commercial and residential, the need to make that, to put in a buffer of some kind between the two uses. Again, question is, this is IL zoning, so it's an industrial zone, but the use itself is that industrial storage of vehicles. Maybe that's commercial, so that's something to consider too. And then I also pointed out that we are a Tree City USA, and I just pointed out this language: trees and vegetation provide privacy, insulate view corridors from negative visual impacts, and buffer between land uses. So these mature trees actually serve a lot of that in this case. They seem to meet that criteria for the trees as outlined in the comprehensive plan. Okay, so the strict criteria for variance don't seem to be met. Mature trees seem to provide that buffer. I mentioned that a variance, or the applicant mentioned that I've been working with them, and a variance goes with the property. So the question for staff was, if this variance gets approved and then later on a building goes on this property, it gets developed on this property, they have a variance for a setback. So they could build they could do parking right up to the edge of the property, and they would not have to put in that landscape buffer. So they tear down those trees, they put in a little landscape buffer out in front of the property, but they wouldn't have to have the landscape buffer as required by code, because this goes with the property forever.
Mayor, can I do a quick interruption with that comment, or?
No, that's fine, because I was going to myself. I was going to ask a question, so go for it.
Okay, well, it's probably
Probably
different.
the same
Maybe
question.
maybe it's illegal too, but I did hear that there's a potential proposal of sunsetting
Yeah.
should a future land sale take place. So
Yeah.
is that legal, and is this something that staff would be in favor of if the variance is approved?
Madam Mayor and Councilmember Bruner, I think that could legally be handled. It would probably be wise to record that specific approval and/or with the signature of the applicant. So it's on title, it's of public record that it does expire. So future property owners aren't thinking they're purchasing the property with the variance.
Thank you very much. That was exactly my question, so thank you.
It's pretty scary if I'm starting to, you're starting to think like me. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, yes.
So can I get just a point of clarification? Are we only talking about the street improvements on 7th Street North? Are we talking about any other portions of the property as well?
So, good question. Let me go back to the view here. So this, the top right portion of this property is actually a irrigation easement. So really not much they can do there. So yeah, it would only be along 7th Avenue.
Okay, so the improvements that we're talking
sorry,
about, the
7th Street.
landscaping that we're talking about is only along 7th?
Correct.
And is there reason, has the forester looked at these trees to see if any of them are diseased or would necessarily need to be mitigated? Or are they all healthy? And the reasoning for deciduous, not or no evergreens, can you explain why our ordinance speaks only to deciduous? Is it because of the Class 1 ratings for those type of street trees?
So I can speak to, so first of all, this was sent to them. I think they did respond. I can't remember the exact wording that they gave, but it was basically that they didn't have concerns about this. I would have put that on our
They
comments
did
here.
not have any concerns? Is that what you said?
Correct. There's no concerns been expressed about it, about the trees. The reason we have that language in the code right now are several things. First of all, their potential to hit power lines, which you've already addressed. The tendency that they become kind of messy and they get out in the road, they drop needles, they kind of ruin the landscaping underneath a lot of times. And so I think that those are some of the reasons that they've given to us in the past. And the last of all is that they're, according to our forester in the past, when I've talked to him about this issue, is that they're sometimes harder to keep healthy.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that was my question. If some of them were diseased or needed to be removed, they could be replaced with deciduous, and then you'd have a mix of deciduous and evergreens. That
Right.
makes sense, but
yeah. Okay.
Are there any other questions for Rodney at this time? Okay, seeing none. So this is a public hearing, and who do we have signed up?
Madam Mayor, we have Kurt Smith who'd like to speak in support of this project.
Good evening, and go ahead and restate your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes, and thank you for being here.
Yes, I'm Kurt Smith. I reside at 2587 Southside Boulevard, Melba, Idaho. I'm the project engineer for this project, and I'm licensed to practice engineering in the state of Idaho. Trees, deciduous trees, conifer trees, why? Why are we so interested in these trees? If you look at the neighbor letter, they are, I was surprised to read the neighbors require, or what they wanted. They state in their letter that the mature Austrian pines are a great buffer to cut traffic noise from Franklin Boulevard. If the city had its way, it would have us tear those trees out and put deciduous trees in. Deciduous trees lose their leaves during the wintertime. And I believe it's the pine needles and the structure of those trees that dampen the noise. And that happens all year round, not just during the summertime. 7th Street has been improved with asphalt curb and gutter. We will go ahead and put in the sidewalk adjacent to the street. There's no overhead issues with the trees remaining as they are. The neighbors like them. And just discussing with Dick, he'd be willing to maintain those trees during the time that he owns that property. So the city wouldn't have to if they have an issue with those kinds of trees. We'll do as you ask, but there are good reasons for us to keep those trees. If you have any questions, I'd like to stand for those.
Yes.
Can you speak to the ground cover? Will there be ground cover added? Or is basically the look that it currently has be retained?
Would be glad to put ground cover if that's what the city would like. Because those trees are there, it's hard to maintain grass because of the pine needles and stuff.
Right.
But we could do decorative rock or other options. We could even do some evergreen shrubs that would meet the requirements of the city's 50% green landscape coverage. I believe they'd do well in that environment, but grass would have a few issues, I believe.
So the sidewalk would be a 5-foot sidewalk?
Yes, it would, adjacent to the.
And then what would be the actual area, width of the landscape area be then? Would it be 10?
The current trees,
To be able to keep those trees?
depends on how you look at the landscape area. Currently, there's enough area for those trees from the back of sidewalk to the existing fence, and that's completely within the right-of-way. So there's enough room to leave that access, or excuse me, that landscaping totally within the right-of-way.
So your request is to just eliminate the additional landscape area that would be on the fence going to the north?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So is there anyone else signed up?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay, so at this time, there's no one else signed up to speak, but I would like to ask if there's anyone here or online that had intended to speak that failed to get signed up? And seeing no one, this is an opportunity for our applicant, Connie, for you to come back and provide any closing comments if you would like.
Mayor?
Yes.
Mayor, this is Rodney, sorry, before she got up, I just thought maybe we'd talk briefly about the sunset that they recommended. We might just think about if the land use changes or if a building is built on it, that at that point, I think that might be a good trigger for us, that would sunset at that point.
Okay, so I see Todd shaking his head yes, and Rodney, you're suggesting that if the council agreed to a sunset or recommended a motion with a sunset, that it would be if the land use changed, correct? At that time it would, and a building were built there at that time, that possibly we would sunset at that time.
Correct.
Okay. And so Connie, as you come forward, that would be something for you guys to say, would that work for you? Okay. So you're welcome to come up.
Yes, that would be acceptable. Yes. I wanted to just clarify one thing on the picture that Kurt was showing you with the row of trees there. It's a little hard to get the perspective, but we did tape it, and from the edge of the curb or the inside of the curb to the fence, the existing fence is 18 to 19 feet. It varies just a little bit, but it's a good wide space there, so. Yeah, I want to, I guess, thank you for considering this. Like Kurt said, we will do what it is you require us to do, but I felt strongly about these trees. I know how hard it is to grow them on my own place. I'd hate to have them taken out. And especially the neighbor letter, I don't know if you've seen that in your packet, but it surprised me as well. Kurt mentioned it surprised him. It surprised me that it's a buffer to the Franklin Road noise. I was thinking they'd say it was a good buffer for the cars going in and out, but it's Franklin Road that they mentioned. So Yeah, so I'll just leave it at that. If you have any questions for me, we'll stand for any questions. I know you've got a really big agenda tonight, so unless you have anything else for me.
Thank you, Connie. So City Council, do you have any questions
Mayor.
at this time?
I have an additional question for Rodney, whether you want to stay there or come up. Basically, the question is future road widening. If we approve the variance, what happens if there's a future road widening request?
I already talked to engineering about this, and there's no plan for widening of that roadway at this time.
Okay, so that's not a concern. And then the additional shrubs potentially to be added that was recommended or stated by the applicant, is that something that is necessary with the boulders and landscape rocks that are currently on this section of property?
It's not necessary, but shrubs definitely help to create that wall for anything lower than where the pine, branches are. So I think it's a added benefit to the neighbors in the area.
But from an ordinance standpoint, how would that be worded? Spacing or at their discretion to present to the planning staff?
Yeah, I think maybe with the approval of the city forester and planning staff.
Thank you.
So I have a question. Typically, do you have to go to the city forester to put a landscape improvement in?
Since this is right-of-way, they do review all of
They do
our
review it.
projects, and they review the landscape plans that get submitted. In this case, it's not a full landscape plan as we would typically get from a landscape architect, but they would review that in every case.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Mayor, just one last question. Then, do you know, is this area, does it have its own irrigation system? So it's being watered?
It does.
Okay.
It
Did you
must
put
be
that
because
in?
the trees are alive.
It's not just road or
Okay.
water runoff or something,
Yeah.
otherwise they'd be
Yeah.
dead by now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other
Anything else?
questions?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. If there are no other questions, I would stand for a motion to close public hearing.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. What is the will of the council?
Looking at the president there, if he's got all his notes down.
I think we,
I got some sketches and
Mayor Clean,
And
I think this is
Council-
a great idea. Anytime we can push our businesses, like, especially this one. Gee, Tom Scott's been there longer than I think I've ever been alive. But it's a great business. It is. I doubt it. 71 years, Tom. So, yeah, I think this is a great idea. As long as we leave the trees, I'm good for that.
Any other comments from council at this time?
So are these conditions of approval, Mayor, or whatever, regarding the sunsetting and also the shrubs, or? Okay. So, President, are you going to make the motion?
Sure.
Okay.
I had to ask Todd if it was okay for me to be a part of this, since a long time ago I did some work on the Tom Scott dealership. You probably don't remember that, but maybe you do. So he said, since I don't have anything current there, that's not a problem. I'll make the motion to approve the request as submitted, variance requiring the parking. Do I need to read this, Todd?
I would read that and then add your conditions.
And then I'll add conditions at the end. I move to approve the variance of NCC 1019-8 requiring parking of vehicles to be set back 20 feet from the right-of-way, 1033-4 dot 3, requiring 15-foot landscape buffer along the property fronting right-of-way, and that would be the right-of-way of 7th Avenue, 7th Street, and 10-33-4 point E, requiring all trees in the right-of-way to be deciduous in order to pave an existing gravel parking lot for vehicle sales inventory for the Tom Scott Motors dealership at 09th Avenue North, which is parcel R 08558000000, in an IL zoning district, and 912 7th Street North, which is also identified as R085590000000 in a BC Community Business Zoning District, totaling 1.27 acres for G. Connie Runya. Sorry if I butchered that, representing Gunner Properties LLC for this variance request because, and I'll state that it appears to meet the, Todd, help me here as far as, do I need a specific language as far as from the screen?
Could I suggest that it maybe be that the removal of the trees is almost in violation of what our tree ordinance and our goal within the city is? In a city of trees, that we, in other areas, we would not be removing trees for a sign, yet we would be requiring, would that qualify?
Madam Mayor and Councilmember Haverfield, that's certainly a justification, especially when it comes to public health, safety, and welfare. I think Rodney had a couple of conditions up there that are requirements that he struggled a little bit with, the special privilege one, and the other, I think otherwise he described them pretty well, how they met. I think, it's up to you. You could say, based on the conditions of the property, and the expiration, or I should say a sunset on the variance, it wouldn't create a special privilege for this particular individual.
Thank you.
As Todd stated then, I think it pretty much would be counterintuitive to remove trees that are so mature and in good health. That doesn't make sense. Any other jurisdiction in the valley would require mitigation of equal or superior caliber of trees be placed elsewhere. So I think retaining as many of those as possible, but shifting the entry to the center of the property makes sense. So I would state that this approval is based upon that taking place. No additional setback would be required unless the ownership changed, and then I would expect the new owner to come in and would the council at that point have the opportunity then to revisit the landscape buffer requirements?
Madam Mayor and Councilmember
With that
Haverfield,
sunset?
I think that essentially it's a sunset, so if that condition happens, then the variance goes away and they have to meet the code requirements.
So with the variance going away, then the stipulation would be that the new owner would have to come back before council at that time. No future road widening was anticipated, so that's a positive. There's no overhead power lines that would cause there to be a concern with the evergreens as currently there. So I think that's my motion.
Yeah, so I think we're going to say.
Or land use.
If ownership or land use changes.
Yeah, either ownership or a land use change request is a part of that sunset clause.
So Mayor, President, are you condition of approval, shrubbery?
That's what I just saw that I hadn't stated yet, so thank you for reminding me. I would request that additional shrubs be added and that the applicant meet with our planning staff, city forester, to determine the extent and placement.
Second. Okay, Mayor, if I may, just quick question on the entry, or we're talking about an entry, then we are removing a tree to have the entry? And is that something that I mean, I don't want to get into the weeds on this or the trees, but is it where comes before us, how many trees are allowed to be removed, or is that totally their decision, or? I mean, we're talking about the love of these trees, but we are going to have to remove at least one, it sounds like, right?
Well, or possibly even more if it was a vision triangle issue.
And so does anybody, I guess I don't have a problem with that, but go ahead.
That would be the planning staff.
Oh,
One tree. Okay, so it's understood that one tree would be removed. And actually, I guess what I'm hearing is that this road it's a dead-end road. I mean, it is not a through street. And so I can't imagine there being a heavy traffic there. 7th, it ends at, would have to go back to that picture, but to my understanding, it's not a through street. Is that correct? That's correct.
That's correct.
Thank you.
So it's, again, it's just a vision triangle issue that they would work out with the planning staff,
Yep.
or with the tree removal, so just
Okay.
put that with them.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Roll call.
Rodriguez.
Yes.
Chingula.
Yes.
Reynolds.
Yes.
Bauer. Brunner.
Yes.
Everfield.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Okay. Thank you for the business that you do in our community. It's appreciated. And, you know, I appreciate the fact that we're going to retain those trees because you have neighbors that were supportive of that and that appreciate you being there. And I believe this is a great improvement to that area. So with the sidewalk going in and the paved lot, good for you. Thank you.
Mayor, I was
Yes.
just, from what I'm hearing, there's way too much collusion up here too, because we've bought way too many vehicles from your dealership.
Well, this is an impartial body, and be careful with that, yeah. Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Connie. Thank you. Okay, we're ready to move to item 7.2 on the agenda. This is an action item. This is annexation and zoning to RS6, which is a single-family residential zoning district and a potential development agreement at 2200 Sunny Ridge Road in order to connect existing single-family home to sewer utilities for Keith Jones, representing Rellis Drussel. Is that good evening? Okay, so you are our applicant. So go ahead and state your name and address.
Keith Jones, I live at 2200 Sunny Ridge, Nampa, Idaho.
Thank you.
lived
And go
there
ahead
for
and
over 20
stand and
years
speak right into that microphone.
now. I said Keith Jones,
Thank you.
2200 Sunny Ridge, Nampa, Idaho. I've lived there over 20 years, real close to it, someplace in there. Burnt down once. Mom burned it down, but then rebuilt, and put a double wide on there. And we kept the same sewer system for a while, but it broke down here this year. And I mean, I know they wouldn't, I could have done it, but you guys, you gotta caught me or something. So we got it going to the city. We are in the city now. I don't care if you put me in the city or leave me out in the country yet, but I just should stay on the other side. But whatever you guys want to do.
So it sounds like you're needing to hook up only because you have a sewer failure,
Yeah,
which is causing you to have to ask for annexation.
yeah.
And you're not wanting to do any type of development, you're just wanting
Oh,
to
no,
annex
I'm not
into
gonna
an
develop that
RS6.
property. Oh, no. If I do, then I'll join the club. But no, I'm just me and my mom, we owned it for several years, and Miss Rellis and me got together, and Mom died on me. And so I gave her half the property, she paid it off. So,
Okay,
and right now, I've put 20,000 into the water or sewer system on that place. And I'm fixed to put another 20,000 into electrical panels. You know what I'm talking about, I think. And I've spent a lot of money on that place this year.
okay. Do we have any questions for Mr. Jones? Okay, thank you. Okay, so we go through a process. The next one is staff report, and then public hearing, and then we'll be back to ask you any other questions.
All right.
Thank you so much.
In other words, you're gonna send me a letter to come back, right?
Yes.
All right. This thing. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Christy Watkins, Principal Planner for the City of Nampa. This is a pretty short and sweet one.
Mr. Jones? You might wait for a few minutes till we get done. Okay, just in case we need to come back, and that way you know what the decision is. So we'll let you know, and just so hang tight. Thank you so much.
The request before you this evening, as you know, is for annexation and zoning to RS6 for 2200 Sunny Ridge Road, as this single-family property has already been connected to city services. So just real quickly, on.
Could I ask you a quick question? Did you just say they have already connected to
They've already
city
connected to
services?
sewer.
So-
Yes.
So when he was mentioning that investment, that's what that investment was, that
That
he's
is-
already connected to sewer? Okay,
That is correct.
thank you.
Run a water line too.
Do you want to click my computer?
I didn't hook up, I got water line.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
This is not working. Weird. Okay. So anyway, planning and zoning decision was that they recommended approval for this annexation based on the fact that it is contiguous to the city limits. It's surrounded by the correct zoning. It does fall within the comprehensive plan for medium-density residential, so the RS6 complies with that as well. So that takes care of the applicable regulations for the annexation and the zoning. City services are obviously available. Correspondence, we got some from the building department for Title IV. Code compliance says that they need to clean up some waste accumulation on the property prior to annexation, so we will make sure that code compliance works with them on that before we read the final ordinance. And the engineering division, of course, has their standard comments. There will be a 50-foot right-of-way dedication required also prior to the reading of the ordinance. The conditions.
Could I ask a quick question? That says along Happy Valley Road.
Yeah, that's a typo.
Oh, okay, thank you, because that is absolutely not correct. Okay.
Yeah, no,
Thank you.
that is a typo. Sorry about that. It is along South Side, and I think it's actually 40 feet along South Side, not 50. That is a typo. Sorry about that.
Okay, could we pause just so that we make sure that what we're voting on tonight and what we're doing is consistent?
Mayor,
Daniel?
it is Sunny Ridge Road, correct? And
Yes.
40 feet.
40 feet.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yes, 40 feet, Sunny Ridge. Sorry about that. I was going to correct that from the last time, and I forgot to do it. So the conditions of approval are listed in your staff report. They're pretty standard. And then these are your motions.
I have a quick question for you. This property is currently, how is it zoned?
It is in the county, so it is not a city zone. It is like R1, I think.
Okay, so
in the
it's not
county.
agricultural
No.
because of the size?
Yeah.
Okay, so it is a residential zoning, okay.
Yes, correct.
Thank you, I just wanted to make sure. Okay. Are there any questions for Christie? Okay, so this is a public hearing?
There is no one signed up, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone here that had intended to testify on this public hearing that did not get signed up? Okay, seeing none. Mr. Jones, do you have any closing comments, anything you'd like to say before we vote?
Nothing real major.
No, okay.
I'm gonna live there till I die anyway.
Okay, good. Council, do you have any questions for Mr. Jones or before we close public hearing? Seeing none, I would stand for a motion to close public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Yes?
I'll make a motion to approve the annexation and zoning to RS6 single-family residential zoning district at 2200 Sunny Ridge Road for Mr. Keith Jones, representing the Umbrellas Russell, with all conditions listed in the staff report.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Brunner,
Yes.
Ingula,
Yes.
Haverfield,
Yes.
Bauer. Reynolds,
Yes.
Rodriguez.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Now we're officially done, and you get to go home. Yes,
Unless you
Mr.
want to stay
Jones.
here and listen.
Yes.
I avoided an Eagles Club meeting tonight too, so don't feel bad.
Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're ready for 7.3 on the agenda. This is an action item. This is annexation and zoning to light industrial zoning district and a potential development agreement for the Nampa Logistics Center at 17293 Northside Boulevard. This is for TO Engineers representing Nampa Logistics Center. Is our applicant here this evening? Good evening. How are you? Good to see you. And go ahead, you can, even though we know you, state your name and address.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Srini Nukula, representing LDK Ventures. Nampa Logistics Center is one of the projects for our company, and my address is 1130 South Rackham Way, Meridian, Idaho. We purchased 138 acres around that small land that you can see in the blue, east of the railroad tracks, and we wanted to purchase this parcel to make it site look more symmetrical or even. And yeah, we purchased this house a few months ago and demolished the house on it, and looking for annexation and rezone to incorporate into the larger parcel that we have, which would make 140 acres. So that's straightforward.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Basically, when we did the blanket annexation, we just did not have this parcel included in that with everything when we did this, and it needs to be.
Well, we didn't own it.
Yes.
And as you can see, like there is another house like north on Northside Boulevard, and we wanted to buy that house too, because there's gonna be industrial development around, and they asked too much for the property, and we value the property based on the land and not the house. They obviously care for the house, so we couldn't reach an agreement, and we decided not to pursue it. But yeah, there's a lot of great things that we have coming up. We actually have an Idaho Power substation going on our property that will be closing. So we just kind of felt it made sense to buy that small property. And we will dedicate the 50 feet right of way. We're also helping design the 5-lane road section on the north side Boulevard, helping the city with that. And yeah.
That's great. Thank you. Are there any questions? Okay, we'll have you back. Thank you. Staff? Good evening, Parker.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'll make this quick. This is really just a missed parcel that was supposed to be annexed back in 2020. It's surrounded by IL and county to the east. The Planning and Zoning Commission voted to recommend approval. Staff finds the property is contiguous. The IL zone is consistent with the comp plan. The final conclusion of law there provides you the significant liberty to determine whether this is the right time and location. The proposed use of warehouse distribution wholesale fits the future planned uses for the area. The current parcels to the east are ag land right now, but they're designated as industrial in the comp plan. The IL zoning would not create a spot zone, and then staff finds that the proposed development would add industrial land that is currently viewed as high demand for the community. Again, there's an overhead picture, the circled piece parcel there in red. The conclusions and of law that I covered there. Correspondence, the required dedication right away is 50 feet along north side, 50 feet from section line. Isn't much else to add here. The one thing to note, the parcel was intended to be annexed. The total annexation of that industrial land there was 355 acres. So this is an addition to that. Conditions of approval are there, and a potential motion, and I will stand for any questions.
Thank you, Parker. Are there any questions for Parker? Thank you, Parker. So this is a public hearing. Do we have anyone signed up?
No, we do not, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Is there anyone here that had intended to testify at the public hearing? Seeing none. Serena, do you have any closing comments? And council, do you have any questions before we close public hearing?
No, Mayor, council members, no, I don't have any further comments for this project now.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. I'd stand for a motion to close public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Mayor, I'll make the motion on this one. This is an easy one. I move to approve the annexation and zoning to light industrial zoning district for Nampa Logistics Center at 17293 Northside Boulevard for TO Engineers representing Nampa Logistics Center with all the recommended findings and conditions listed in the staff report.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Rodriguez. Changula.
Yes.
Reynolds.
Yes.
Bauer. Haverfield.
Yes.
Brunner.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you so much for being here this evening. And thank you for the work you do.
Thank you. Just wanted to share the Shannon Drive property, the freeway frontage. We're starting construction next week.
It's pretty exciting.
So it's going to be a good-looking building there, so. Thanks,
Awesome.
guys.
Thank you so much. Take care. Okay, we're ready to move to action item 7.4, and it is requested for a continuance on this item to November 2nd. And I would stand for a motion
So
to
moved.
continue this. Thank you.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we continue our zoning text amendment, item 7.4, to November 7th. Is there any discussion? Roll call.
Rodriguez. Brunner.
Yes.
Chingula.
Yes.
Bauer. Reynolds.
Yes.
Satterfield.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
We're ready for 7.5 on the agenda. This is an action item. This is a variance to the Nampa City Code 1085.b, requiring a minimum 20-foot setback for the primary front property line for a garage at 702 Smith Avenue. This is in an RS6 zoning district. And this is for Susan Schindler, representing Piece of Cake Properties. Is our applicant here this evening? Good evening. Go ahead and come forward and state your name and address.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Susan Schindler, and I'm representing my business, Piece of Cake Properties, and address is 714 Smith Avenue. So this was a lot split project that I've been doing over last several years, and I'm ready to develop the third lot that we're referencing, the subject property. I have already submitted and been approved for a conditional use permit for a duplex for this lot. At the time that I developed this middle lot, it has since been developed and sold. I was required to do a private shared driveway, asphalted with a hammerhead, and that is strictly accessing those three properties only. So it's a shared private driveway, not a through street or anything. And at the time, that was in 2020, 2021, and so at subsequent time, May of this year, they have now implemented this 20-foot additional setback. So just because timing-wise, I wasn't able to develop both the parcels at the same time, I have run into this situation. So the shared driveway is already in place with the 20-foot easements, which is actually 27 feet off of the property line to the east, which is where we're requesting the variance go for the garage. We're going to be having an L-shaped duplex there. And in order for me to do that duplex, which is designed to be a single-story, 2-bedroom, 2-bath per unit, which is in keeping with the neighborhood, there's 2 duplexes to the west, to the northwest, that have been there for about 20 years, that are the same type, and there's lots of single stories right within this area. And without this variance, I would be forced to do a 2-story in order to accommodate that additional 20 feet frontage that they're asking for.
Council, do you have any questions for Susan? So Susan, we'll move to staff report, open public hearing, then we'll have you come back
Thank you.
and see if we have any further. Thank you so much.
Mayor, Council, for the record, Rodney Ashby. So on this one, staff recommends approval based on the legal conclusions that must each be found to be supported by the facts of the case in order for a variance to be granted. These are the conclusions. I wanted to just highlight, just real quickly, we are changing up our staff reports just a little bit. The city attorney and I have had some conversations about how we notify the applicant of the findings of fact that's required by state law and local law. And so what I've done is I've stated the conclusions up front, and then I'll have a slide that says that our staff's recommendations for findings. So like on the previous one before, we had to come up with all the findings. What we're going to try to do is come up with findings for you to adopt. If you have anything to add to those or change those, that is fine, but it's just staff recommendations. So then when you make your motion, you will need to just say, and the proposed staff findings or proposed findings. So I put that into the motion. We think that's a cleaner way of being able to notify the applicants about how they complied with the law. Okay, so jumping into the history there, there's a lot of history on this one. 1971, the annexation and zoning followed that. It was unclear. It's pretty old, and so I couldn't find the exact date of annexation and zoning there. August of 2002, the property was split from Lot 24 of Westview subdivision. May 2019, the Planning and Zoning Commission approved a conditional use permit for a duplex on the subject property, conditioned upon council approval of the rezone and the short plat. And then those went on to city council in June, and you approved the rezone to RS6 and the short plat into 3 lots, and then therefore the CUP for the duplex came about and was approved. But then January of 2020, no permits had been pulled or construction begun on the property that was approved for the duplex, so the conditional use permit expired. May 2022, City Council adopted the code amendment that clarified where the required 20-foot setback for a residential garage should be measured from, and she pointed that out. That made the proposed, that she originally got approved for but expired, that proposed duplex not compliant with the new code. So I worked with her. Nampa Planning and Zoning Commission approved the conditional use permit, a new one, because the other one expired, for a duplex on the property. And while drafting the staff report, Nampa Planning and Zoning staff noticed that inconsistency with our code now because of the setback and recommended she come in for a variance. Okay, so it's in the middle of medium density residential. It's surrounded by RS6 zoning. It's very consistent. When it was ag before, I think it was RA or ag, it was inconsistent with what it was around it. So this is far more consistent. Everywhere around it is single-family homes or duplexes, as she's pointed out, to the northwest. The property has access on the east side of the property connecting to Smith Avenue, and I'll highlight that. There's the plat and the easement, where that easement is located. So that's that hammerhead she was talking about. So this is the code. It clarifies that if your front yard or the front setback is A, then B and D are your side setbacks. And so the A, it gets measured from the width of the easement. And this is really important, primarily if the easement is going to continue on to other properties beyond this property. In this case, we've approved a subdivision just to the north. This has no intention of connecting between the two. So this is the end of the road.
So Rodney, can you go back? I'm just confused on the access to this property. So I'm looking at the aerial view of the property, and is the access, boy, and I'm not sure how this is positioned. I'm assuming the top of the page on the aerial view is north. So let's just say that the north, so Smith Avenue, I need to find, okay, so I see Smith Avenue. So the access is going to be coming through this lot 714 and 710?
Yep, and that easement is already there. That was a part of the plat. So she split that into 3. It used to be one parcel, and she split it into 3. You approved, the city council approved that into 3 different lots. And then the access is an easement that gives her access on the east side of the property.
On the east side. So then can I ask another question? In putting a duplex in this area, how many duplexes are adjoining this property that they have a conditional use permit to put a duplex in? Are any of the properties that are on the east or west side
None of the
duplexes?
properties touching this have duplexes on them, but there are duplexes in the area.
But none of these, how far away are the duplexes, quote, in the
You
area?
could see it on some of the, whoops,
There it is, right there. So 132, 128,
So where's
138, and 136,
132 is-
just off of North Poplar Street to the, yep, there you go, thank you. This isn't working
Which is really
anymore.
quite a distance from this property, but a conditional use permit has already been given?
It has been
Through
approved.
planning and zoning?
Mhm.
I find that, okay. I'll reserve my comments. Thank you.
Mayor? So Rodney, the grass area, is that to the north that's
Yeah.
open? Is that did you say that's platted? for-
Yep, that's been approved for Lions View Estates.
Which
Those
is,
are single-family homes, just small subdivision of single-family homes.
so it really is surrounded by single-family homes.
But the hammerhead turn that's been proposed in slide, or page 193, it terminates at that northern boundary. It doesn't cross over.
Mayor,
that's correct.
Councilman Haverfield, the drive aisle for the Lions View Estates, because of how that comes in on Davis and Purple Sage, it comes down on the west side of that property, while the drive aisle or the common driveway in the Smith Hideaway subdivision is on the east side. So they will not need to connect. They both provide fire turnaround access at either end.
Plus, this graphic would indicate that the garage or Unit B would be going out to the east side, so we couldn't have a continuation there without that being a problem with that
Correct.
garage.
Okay, Daniel, if you can move along. Yep, keep going. Thank you. So your variance criteria, you know about those. That's fine. Keep going. Keep going. Again, the only comment I had was from building department that they'll have to meet Title IV. Comprehensive plan had very little about this, and the plan does speak to providing a diverse housing stock. It encourages density and encourages compatibility with existing development wherever possible. So those are the things that I could find from the comprehensive plan. The front setback request, they are requesting a 0-foot front setback from the easement. And 20 feet setback from easement ensures vehicle driveways don't inhibit emergency vehicle accessing other properties beyond that property. In this case, there is no other properties beyond that. And there is no intention for access to the north. Can you go to the next slide? Thank you. So I'm hoping this is helpful. So the easement you can see there for this property is highlighted kind of in gray, and then the yellow highlights the distances. So there's the access and utility easements on the far right side. The green is the 0-foot setback they are requesting so that they can build up to that 0-foot setback. So there is a good distance from the property line. It's just that condition where you take the front setback from the easement that creates a problem here. So I drew in a red line there to show a potential of where that would be. A 20-foot setback from the green line is where you could build the building if you followed the code exactly as it's written today.
Mayor?
Yes.
So Rodney, looking at the green line that's indicated, garage A would appear to indicate that the fire engine turnaround would need a little bit more room than what's being given to it as far as to meet that turnaround requirement. Has
Yeah.
the fire department reviewed this?
I know, Mayor and Council, I noticed that as well. They will have to meet the standards of the fire department. This doesn't give them what the 0-foot setback does. If you grant this variance, a 0-foot setback says it's the edge of that easement. So wherever that easement is where they'll be able to construct their building.
So that's the foundation. What about overhang of a roof? Would that impede a fire engine being able to turn around?
That's a good question. Do you have any insight there?
If the overhang of the roof were lower than 13 feet 6 inches off the ground, it would impede the turnaround.
which it probably would be.
Yeah.
And then the full 20-foot, it appears to be on this property, but there's a property in between this and the house that's on Smith. Is that to be developed as a single-family residence?
Madam Mayor and council, yes, and it already has been.
Okay, so it's not in the photograph or the aerial view?
Correct.
That's
It's-
710?
It's really recent.
So 710 is a single family?
Correct.
Okay. Can you tell me that's going back to the setbacks that, a zero, so what is the setback that's required on the east and the west side property line?
On the east, it would be, since it's the front of the property, we're calling that the front, that would be 20 feet from the easement. So from the
And
green
is that the
line to the
drive
red
aisle?
line.
Is that the drive aisle? That 20-foot drive aisle? Shared driveway?
Yeah, that's that shared, yep, that's that access easement.
Okay. And then what about on the north side then?
So the north side setback is actually only 5, but they are showing 7 feet here.
So it is 7 feet, a single story.
Single story.
Okay. And then the west side?
And then the west side is actually 5 feet as well, but they are showing more than 7 feet. I don't know what the exact measurement is, and so I think this gets back to what Councilman Haverfield was talking about. They do have a potential of bumping that to the west a little bit, that garage to the west, to comply with the easement.
Mayor?
Yes.
So water and sewer connections, are they coming up from Smith? Do you know?
I believe they're already in there.
Mayor, Councilman Haverfield, they were developed with the subdivision, and yes, they do come from Smith through the ingress-egress utility easement that runs north along the east property line.
Okay.
Next slide. So I didn't have any recommended conditions, but if you choose to add any, you're welcome to do that. And next slide. These are the staff recommended findings. If you choose to approve this variance, then here are the facts that could support that variance. So I outlined as many of the facts that I could come up with there.
Mayor, I have another question for Rodney. What about vegetation? Is there a required number of trees to be placed on the parcel? And if they're to be in the front setback, and that's primarily a drive area, how do they handle meeting that requirement?
Yeah, great question. So they do have to have 2 trees on the property, and the code allows me to give another location rather than the front area if they can't fit it on their lot.
It's a balance of the open areas or easements, so that's
Yeah.
where there'd be an issue.
Are there any other questions for Rodney at this time?
Can you go to that? I think it's the final slide. So again, the last part of that recommended or potential motion is with all staff recommended findings. If you have different findings, if you deny it, you just need to state the reasons why it doesn't comply with those criteria in the code.
Thank you. So this is a public hearing, and,
There is no one signed up, Madam Mayor.
okay, is there anyone here that had intended to speak on this particular issue? Seeing none, this is an opportunity for our applicant to come back and provide any follow-up comments.
So the exact location of where the duplex can go has a little bit of flexibility, as Rodney was pointing out. My architect's currently working on it, so it hasn't been finalized exactly to meet these setback needs. And the hammerhead, which was already approved by the fire department and planning and zoning, and that was all developed in conjunction with having enough room for that fire truck to come in stop, back up, and then exit out of the same direction. So that's how the function of that is supposed to go. And if we needed to, use that other 2 feet to move it away from the actual end of that easement to allow for that truck to have enough space there, we can certainly do that. And then at the time of development, water and sewer were brought to both those lots at the same time. So those are there, and they are just waiting for the building permit and hookup for the development of Lot 3. And then as far as the vegetation requirement, I would probably want to talk to Rodney about the location of those, because if they have a concern about the edge or an overhang of the garage for the hammerhead, if we were to place, my vision was to place some greenery in the kind of front area there. But if the trees are mature and are too large, then that would also cause a problem for the fire truck. So I would want to prevent that. So I guess I would have to find out what type of tree they would accept and what would work in that scenario. But I'm absolutely willing to do that. And then, let's see. And then just to reiterate, the hammerhead is existing. So it's in place, it's asphalted, it's 20 foot wide. It met the distance regulations of how far it needed to go this direction, how far it needed to go back to the north. It will not connect at any time to that property of the north. I do know those property owners, and they have, we have a fence line that delineates those 2 properties. And the way that they have their access from Davis Avenue, there is no way, because there is no way for that hammerhead to access further to there, because that would be the backs of the single-family home properties that they're putting on that north. So we have no plans for that. So I think that's it. If there's any other questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
Susan, are you planning on a duplex, or are these going to be townhouses?
Duplex.
Okay, so they won't be split and for
Correct.
different ownership? Okay.
There's one adjoining wall.
Okay. Yeah, it'll be a firewall, but you won't have 2 separate ownerships?
Correct.
Okay. And then I thought I heard you just say that the asphalt's already in place for the turnaround?
Yes.
So you already know the edge of where the garage needs to be. Where it's shown overlapping now, that you say your draftsman's going to be reconfiguring.
We're going to
this.
be finalizing that, yeah. We just kind of put that together as a visual to show kind of what the layout of the duplex is going to be, that L shape, and then the exact location will be finalized at the time that I think.
And the
depending, we're
turnaround
gonna
is-
apply
is-
for a building permit, yeah.
The turnaround's 20 foot wide. It appears that there's a 7-foot landscape strip along the eastern boundary line.
Correct, which is also a, it's more than a landscape strip. It is a, what do they call that, Rodney, that we had to do all along that whole east side?
So
No,
it's a utility easement?
No, the swale. It's a drainage swale.
Okay, so your stormwater retention's in there.
Yes.
Is that, again, for staff then, is that where the utilities are as well as in that easement? So they could put a tree in there?
No.
No?
I don't, no.
Generally, we do not recommend trees within drainage swales.
Right.
They could put it at the top of the slope of that, depending on the proximity with the house, but that would be determined at a building permit review stage, not at a conceptual stage here.
So the stormwater retention swale takes up the whole eastern boundary line?
It runs 7 foot wide, and it runs the entire length of the property down to Smith Avenue.
Kind of restricts.
The
what you
3
can do.
properties, 243 feet, to be exact.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you so
Thank you.
much. If there are no other questions for the applicant, I would stand for, a motion to
I'll make a
close
motion
public
to close the
hearing.
public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
At a momentary, making sure we just did that. So thank you. Okay, so I have a comment, but I want to hear from council. Or I can make my comment.
Make your comment.
Okay. So I understand at 0.7 acres, that's a big lot in the midst of possibly smaller lots. If this were to be approved, I would like to see a fence be required as a conditions of approval. That is a privacy fence, a nice vinyl fence that's placed around this property, so that there's a barrier fully around it. What concerns me, when we say there are duplexes close by, I've looked across our city, and Susan, this is no offense to you at all. When I see single-family residents, and then in the middle of them, we have a duplex. And I'm thinking, how do we as a city do that? When we have, and this has got single-family all around it, and then we're putting a duplex right in the middle of it. And I understand that the conditional use permit has been granted. Personally, I think as a city, we need to stop doing that because it's created a very unattractive environment for single family. That said, a conditional use permit has been granted. And there, our applicant is well down the road on their development. And so I don't oppose it happening because they've been granted that, but I would ask that a nice privacy fence be around this property so that there is a definite barrier and then the landscaping that would be required with it. Those are my comments.
Mayor Kling, I'll make a motion then to, I don't have a problem with this. It's internal lot development, so it's not right on a major roadway. And they've gone out of their way to try to comply with creating a turnaround, which is difficult to do. So I'll make a motion to support the approval that staff has recommended with the conditions of approval in our packet, along with ensuring that a 6-foot privacy fence be put around the property, that all landscaping be brought before the Planning and Zoning Commission for approval. And I believe that's it.
Mayor?
Yes. Well, there's a motion on the table, so it would be.
I'll second it.
You'll
Have a
second it?
comment.
Okay.
So most of the time I agree with what the mayor just stated, where in most cases, I think I would be against something like this. However, I know exactly what street this is on. When I was 8 years old, I lived around the corner from it. It's kind of run down, and this will, in some cases, where even though it's the zoning's whatever less dense or condos or apartments or whatever compared to single family houses, sometimes those are nicer than the single houses that are in the area, and it can be an upgrade actually when the houses are run down, not taken care of, and there's no HOAs and things like that. So in this case, I will be voting yes, but just want to state, normally I'd be opposed to something like this.
So, Mayor, if I may, this question, so on the fence condition of approval, are we talking about the full perimeter, or are we talking about every side of this? She has properties on the south side.
Right, and it wouldn't go the whole way because there's a shared access there. So it would go down to the point where, there would.
Well, just so she has an understanding or understanding where the fence actually privacy fence would go.
Okay, so it'd be northwest and east sides of the property, and then a portion of the south side to the point where the shared access occurs.
Actually, unfortunately not, because we've closed public hearing. So I do apologize. We could reopen public hearing so that we could hear from the applicant, and I would welcome that if you would like to do that.
So I'm going to pull my motion back off then?
No, yes, if you would like to withdraw your motion.
I'm not sure what the applicant wants to ask, but it's not going to change my motion.
Okay.
But yeah, I'll
Okay,
pull
we
my
don't
motion.
have to then.
Oh, and pull.
Yeah. Do you want to pull your second? No, we'll.
I have to.
Okay, with that, and thank you, I would stand for a motion to reopen public hearing so we could hear a response from the applicant.
So moved.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, So thank you for speaking to the
Just to
fence.
clarify, so all along the north side, there is an existing 6-foot fence that myself and the north property owner will be replacing brand new. So that takes care of the entire north property line.
So that will be a privacy fence.
Exactly.
A 6-foot privacy
Exactly.
fence, okay?
And then yes, that side going down that direction, I am already planning to redo that. There's an existing fence, not on my property line, in poor condition. So that is already in the plans. And then right where you're pointing there, Rodney, to there. Okay, so right there, the current owner of 710 Smith Avenue is not myself. It's owned by a different private property owner. They have already constructed a privacy fence partially along that area. So the only area in question would be, there is an existing fence there. That whole property line, that whole 240 feet has fence line.
Existing, and is it 6-foot
Yes.
privacy fence?
Yes, because actually all those homes to the east are elevated up from this property level. So there's retaining wall, and then there's the properties are up above it, and the fence lines go even further higher than 6 foot.
So is it your intention to replace that fence or leave it as
No,
it is?
it's
okay?
actually not on my property line. Those are all fence lines that belong to those 4 properties.
Okay.
Yeah,
So I'll amend my motion to indicate what you've just said.
thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I would stand for a motion to close public hearing.
So moved.
All in favor? Okay, back to the motion.
Remember what I said now? No.
Mayor,
Yes.
I just wanted to clarify something. In the motion, it was stated conditions as recommended in the staff report. Just a reminder that we need the staff recommended findings.
You recommended findings, but do we need to, so there are no conditions, but do we need to reference the findings? Because we're just approving a variance
Madam
for the
Mayor,
findings as identified by staff.
I
Okay.
think Darrell's previous motion on another case was pretty darn close to what you make on this one. So just approve the recommended findings from staff and any conclusions that, or excuse me, conditions that are in there and any you want to add.
There weren't any conditions of approval.
So actually, if we just read what is on the list, if you approve it, it says with all staff recommended findings. That would be period, and the following conditions that you're going to put on.
There you go.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the variance NCC 10-8-5.b, requiring a minimum 20-foot setback from primary front property line for any garage at 702 Smith Avenue in an RS6 single-family residential zoning district for Susan Schindler, representing Piece of Cake Properties with all staff recommended findings. And the condition that a 6-foot privacy fence be added in areas where they don't currently exist. And is that good enough? Okay, which would include north, east, west, and a portion of the southern boundary of this property.
It's been moved and seconded?
And that I'm sorry, and
Okay.
that the landscape, again, conditions, requirements be brought before our planning staff for approval.
Okay. Any discussion? Roll call.
Rodriguez,
Yes?
Brunner,
Yes.
Chingula,
Yes.
Reynolds,
Yes.
Bauer,
Yes.
Haverfield.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. So Susan, hopefully with your comments, staff has your comments of fencing, and so you guys can just visit. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. We are ready for our last action item of the evening, and this is a public hearing to consider amending Title IV, adding Chapter 12, providing for the implementation of a vacant building registration permit program with associated fees and fines. And Robin, thank you for being here late tonight.
Yes. So tonight we're going to talk about the vacant building ordinance. Let's see. Daniel's helping me out with sharing the content. Sharing. Thank you. Perfect. All right. So Normally Patrick would be presenting because it's obviously around building code, but he's unavailable, and so I'm his second string quarterback tonight. So the vacant building ordinance is for the proposed adoption of the ordinance amending Title IV, adding Chapter 12, providing for the implementation of vacant building registration permit ordinance with the authorization for the mayor to sign the ordinance. If you'll remember, Patrick came before you a couple of months ago. The background on it is we have a couple of derelict buildings in the downtown and from our business improvement district and also from our Main Street organization. They asked if the city could help with coming with a solution to, with these vacant buildings that are in our downtown. And then Patrick's been working on this vacant building ordinance, and this is a solution that we worked on. So a definition of a vacant building is, as used herein, means a building or buildings that is unoccupied and is not actively used as a place of residence or business. Or B, is frequently open or unsecured so that unauthorized admittance may be gained without damaging any portion of the property. So the fee structure is on this slide. On vacant buildings that shall pay an annual fee for the following fee schedule would be residential of $504 for a single family residence. And then for commercial and multifamily, or also in the downtown historic, so buildings that are less than 10,000 square feet would be $720 to be added to the registration. And then just over $1,000, $1,008 for buildings or tenant spaces over 10,000 square feet. The way that this was calculated by Patrick was just the hourly rate that it would take for the inspection of the building, the size of the building, and then also the processing. So it was figured at $72 an hour, about 7 hours for the 504. So that's how the fee structure, he figured out that fee structure. The first annual fee shall not be paid no later than 30 days after the building becomes vacant. If the fee is not paid within 30 days of being due, the owner shall be in violation of this subchapter. The fee shall be paid in full prior to the issuance of any building permits, with the exception of a demolition permit. And then finally, the revenues that are collected will be put into the Development Services Fund. Exemptions to this requirement is to actively market vacant commercial buildings. The following are exemptions for this vacant commercial building recommendation. That the vacant commercial building is under active construction or renovation, and the necessary building permits have been received by the owners of the vacant building, and the construction is in compliance with the applicable building codes. Or the vacant building code has suffered fire or extreme weather damage, and the owner is actively pursuing repair or demolition of the building. And finally, a request for on any other basis for an exemption due to a hardship that may be submitted to the building official. Any exemption that is granted must be in writing and may be granted for no more than 6 months, after which the owner must submit another request. Granting a hardship exemption does not establish a precedent for or guarantee any subsequent exemptions. As part of the vacant building code, there would be annual inspections, and they also need to maintain maintenance standards. The annual inspection would be the building official, the fire marshal, or their designees are authorized to inspect for dangerous conditions that present a hazard to life safety. And there would be an annual third-party inspection report reports that are required. The maintenance standards, vacant buildings shall be maintained to the standards of current property maintenance code, fire code, and building code. Okay, so occupying leasing a vacant building. After a notice of violation, basically this section is saying that no one can go into the building, be in the building without there being a certificate of occupancy from the building department. And then a notice of civil infraction and continuing offenses. The building official and their designee are designated as the code enforcement officer for the city regarding the enforcement of these provisions. And so the violation section, a person may be found guilty of any one or more of the following offenses under this chapter. If they do not register for a to be on the vacant building registry, if there's a failure to keep the information accurate on the building, if there's a failure to actively market a vacant commercial building for lease or for sale, and if there's a violation of any of the provisions in this chapter. Penalties and fine. Any owners who shall violate any provision of this chapter for the first time would be fined $300 the first time. And then any prior infractions would be up to $1,000 or by imprisonment up to 30 days. Or by both, such as fine and imprisonment. The imposition of any penalty for this violation shall not excuse the violation or permit it to continue. Each day of violation shall constitute a separate offense. So that was a lot of information about the vacant building code registry. And that basically is where we got to for the code and how a person can register. To be able to enforce this, at first it would be just when there's noticed buildings that are vacant. Eventually, Patrick said that there would be funding for some enforcement, but currently it would just be when buildings are noticed that they've been vacant.
Mayor,
Yes.
are we ready for questions?
Sure thing.
Are we talking about the whole city of Nampa, everything within the city limits?
That's correct.
Because originally I thought we were just talking about downtown, historic districts or a boundary. We're talking about all of the city of Nampa, so it affects a larger geographic area.
Yes.
Mayor,
Yes.
just clarification. So if someone is in violation or does not pay their, say it's a 10,000 square foot.
Yep.
Doesn't pay their $1,000, then they'd be required a $300 penalty, so it'd be a $1,300, or they could have a misdemeanor charge.
Yep.
Correct?
That's correct.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that. Thanks.
Mayor,
Yes.
oh, go ahead, I'll wait for you.
That's okay.
So who's going to be the vacant building ordinance, or who's going to go around town and see all these? Me? Okay. Right, Robin, right there. Who's going to do that? You said code enforcement.
Yeah, so it would be the building official that will go in and inspect, or somebody in the building department would go in and inspect. There isn't going to be someone who's out there just walking around looking for that. It would be just when we notice, we know a couple buildings in downtown have been vacant for a very long time. And then as building inspectors are out and about, they may notice something. Eventually, there will be a paid position that would have this as part of their work.
So is there going to be an app connected to the city that can show the progress or the status of that building? Or is it going to be code enforcement status kind of stuff?
Currently, I think it's the code enforcement. I don't know of any plans for an app.
Okay, thank you.
So Mayor, one more clarification, and I'll be quiet. Paul's on 12th, so that would be eligible for this type of
That's
since
correct.
it has been vacant for a couple of years. Okay, thanks.
Yes.
But it would be within the building department, I think, rather than, quote, code enforcement.
Yep.
So I think, just to be clear, I think if I understand correctly, it's the building department, building official in the code enforcement side
Okay.
that will be looking. I do want to clarify, thank you, Todd. Go ahead.
Couple points, Mayor, thank you.
Yes.
And I think it was mentioned, but just to be clear, this is residential and commercial, both. And then I did catch one typo in the text of the ordinance, section 4-12-051. There's a reference to 41208 sub C, which is the actively market. It should actually be 41209 sub C.
Thank you. So I do have a quick question. One of the discussions we've recently had, and I may address this to legal, so Robin, you're not on the spot on this, but it's when you have a partial building. So you have a building, and we do have some large commercial or retail buildings that are partially occupied, but then there's a large footprint that is not occupied. And in asking earlier, we said that it would apply to that non-occupied space. But I haven't I probably am not seeing it. I didn't look deep enough. I just want to make sure that the language in the ordinance addresses that. Because I didn't see it was real obvious that if a building has, my goodness, it could have 50,000 square feet, and they have leased out 20,000 square feet, but they have 30,000 sitting there vacant. The 30, if I understand correctly, the 30,000 square feet that is vacant is subject to the vacant building ordinance and subject to fine based on that.
That was my understanding as well.
Great, so I just want to clarify with legal, because I don't know that I've really seen the language that it's clear, and that is our understanding based on some internal discussions.
Madam Mayor, I don't know if I don't recall being a part of that discussion.
You weren't at that time.
I don't know, I don't think that the language as it's currently written would cover that. I'm just looking at the definition of vacant building. It means a building or buildings that is unoccupied and not actively used as a place of residence or business, or B, is frequently open or unsecured so that unauthorized admittance may be gained without damaging any portion of the property. So that doesn't really slice up the building. And if you want to somehow do that, then I think we probably need to rework the language a little bit.
I'm thinking, because that, I believe, was the intent, because we currently have some buildings that are large buildings that are vacant, but there's a percentage, yeah. So I asked this question in an internal meeting earlier this week and was told that it did apply, but as I'm reading it again, I'm not seeing that the same thing that you're seeing. So because this is a public hearing, we really would have to approve the ordinance as it is stated, correct?
Madam
We'd
Mayor,
have to continue it and could we adjust the ordinance and come back with an adjusted ordinance?
I think so. You could direct staff to come back and continue the public hearing and have the new draft ready for consideration.
Okay, could we do that as soon as like the next council, or like a month away? Or does that have to be renoticed?
I would probably renotice it.
Does that have to go then through planning and zoning again? So we're talking quite a ways out.
Mayor, is this isn't part of the zoning code, is it? It's part of the building code? I don't know that it went through planning and zoning, did it?
No.
It did not, so it only
Oh.
comes to council.
Yeah.
But it would need to be renoticed. The other thing we could do would be, because this is a public hearing and it has been noticed, approve it as stated and then come back and amend it.
Correct.
I think I would recommend that route so that we get it done. So, okay. So thank you for answering my questions.
So, okay, what you stated is not, though, a part of what's being proposed tonight.
Correct. What's being proposed tonight is a vacant building as defined, is the building in its entirety.
Right.
And it isn't giving place for that. But so that we don't pause progress, I would recommend that we approve the ordinance as stated and then potentially come back with cleanup language, which would be a public hearing, but that could be done down the road so that we can actually move forward with this vacant building ordinance.
And I can support that rationale, because I had concern about if you have a partially occupied building, especially when we're looking at a potential downturn in the economy. Karcher Mall is an example of a fairly major footprint that's not going to be fully occupied. So we're basically penalizing the owner for not being able to have it fully occupied. And I don't think that's right or reasonable.
But they are actively working to, they would be an exception because they're actively working to fill that building. So they would not be charged a vacant building. It's a building, am I allowed to mention a building name? I don't know if that's wise. Okay, so for example, Kmart. Kmart is sitting there and has been sitting there vacant for quite some time. And what happens when a building sits vacant for a very long period of time, it becomes a nuisance. And what we're dealing with today is you've got a parking lot that's being used for sometimes illegal activity and that is a risk to that area. Those are the kinds of things we want to disincentivize. But part of that building is being occupied, and so there's a partial use.
And that's understandable, and I think even the old Northwest Mutual building on 12th Avenue set vacant, and then they took it down, and then with the intent to eventually redevelop multiple buildings on it. That hasn't taken place, but what it did was it resulted in the building going away, which was a good building. But even the old hospital next to the rec center was a vacant building. And so what you'll end up with is probably just brownfield sites throughout town, as rather than, get penalized for not having a vacant, or having a vacant building on their
But
property.
for example, with St. Alphonsus Building, as it set there, they were actively seeking out a solution, but it was taking a long time. And that $1,000 fine was nothing compared to the cost to keep that building up. It was just minimal. So in a situation like that, I think the city would be in conversations with them if they're actively pursuing. And actually, this fine is pretty minimal for a big building. For a company, they wouldn't blink an eye at it.
It would be nice to see the old Kmart site developed into something, maybe just like the Karcher Mall, where
Yes.
there's, somebody comes in, piecemeals it out, and creates a mixed-use approach. That would be ideal. This wouldn't be enough, like you say, to really incentivize that. They're just going to keep sitting on it.
Mayor Ling.
Madam
Yes.
Mayor, I have
Try it, and I'll develop a plan for it.
So Councilman Reynolds and then Rodriguez.
Most of this ordinance, as I read through, made sense to me. The 412-6, to me, and this would be a question for legal too, and it could be addressed later if you come back and change the language in the ordinance. But the annual and maintenance standards, especially under page 5, some of the language is just too broad, in my opinion, there. Because it talks about like, it shall be installed in accordance with applicable codes and ordinances. That would have happened when the building was constructed, and it would be inspected at that time. And then it's talking about maintain in sound condition and good repair. So, for example, let's say it has a gas furnace in there, and who's going to be the one that goes in there and says, well, this gas furnace is no good, we need to rip it out and cap it off at a big expense to the owner, when that's not the building official's expertise. I did see some language in there to have experts look at that kind of stuff, but the language is pretty broad to tear something out. And then, like, for example, water and sewer to be capped off, at what point in the building? Like outside, in the utilities, at the meter? Some of that stuff can be pretty costly, and I understand what the intent was. It just seems pretty broad to me.
Okay, that's great feedback. Yeah, we can work on that.
Okay. So we've had a lot of questions. This is actually in the staff report side, the applicant and staff report side. So this is a public hearing, but I see your laptop closed, so I'm going to assume there's no one signed up to speak.
Mayor Kling.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Victor, I apologize.
That's okay. I'll
Thank
get you,
you.
don't worry.
I'm so sorry.
These two trade seats.
That's okay, sorry.
Robin, I found a couple of, to me, concerns about the ordinance. I think the ordinance in its entirety is what we need to do here in Nampa. The problem being is that, number one, is the efficiency. We will have, now I'll take, for example, the Kmart, where it's partially occupied. It seems to me that if we don't have a structured facility that someone is trying to, let's say, someone's trying to occupy it, but they say, we're not going to be able to occupy it for another 3 years. Well, that kind of leaves us in a position where we are now. That's such as the Karcher Mall. We can't occupy it because of, but we're going to try. So unless those are defined, I'm struggling with this just a little bit, even though the concept I really like. The other thing is that the punishment, $1,000 or imprisonment I think that's a little stiff. So I'm not sure I like that. I'm concerned with that. I know there's a reactive consequences to what we're looking at, but I think the civil penalties would be better than violation of a misdemeanor, which I'm not sure, this is a legal question for Todd, I'm not sure we can impose unless under city code, right? We can't imprison anybody on city codes, can we, Todd?
Madam Mayor and Councilmember Rodriguez, you do have misdemeanor authority for city code violation. You've got a handful of things in your code that are misdemeanor.
Oh, that's true, that's true.
But whether you think this is appropriate, that's what you all sit here for.
Yeah, okay. So those are the only two things. Can you address those issues?
Yeah, we're happy to address those. I mean, we can go back and as staff and work through, draft and talk about the feedback that we received from Councilman Reynolds and then also from you, and look at what we can bring forward in a month, and work with Mayor as well, obviously, and have something with more detail, and then looking at the penalty or the fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Robin.
Excuse me, Cliff, would you like to come forward? Sorry, my mic wasn't on.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. Cliff Long, Development Services. Certainly understand when we went through this process, we did not want to make these fines necessarily punitive in there. And as Robin explained at the beginning of the presentation, this is based on cost recovery for what it takes to inspect and track these kind of structures within our community. When I was here working for the city many years before, we had a problem building that's no longer with us here, and it was the old Mercy Hospital. And it had over 300 calls for service between police and fire. The cost to the taxpayer on something like that is real. And, to be able to have a tool that would allow us to track and help them do the right thing is, I think, very valuable for our citizens. And certainly, where $1,000 may seem like a lot, there's not going to be that many buildings that go through this when you take out the folks who are actively working to do the right thing. So Councilmember Brunner mentioned Paul's on 12th. Paul's is actively, it's well maintained, it's actively marketed. This is not going to be a huge financial burden for something like that. But when we do have a bad apple, this is, one way to help move them in the right direction.
And, I'm just thinking a conversation that we had, I believe it was related to fire and related to the Simplot building, for example. When a building is setting unattended, and then you have a fire, and you've got your fire responding to that building, there's a huge risk of life going in because they don't know the condition, the state of that building when it's setting for a prolonged period of time. So I think, and then I do want to say that I believe our Downtown Business Improvement District Board has strongly encouraged us. In fact, we've been very slow bringing this forward because the vacant buildings have been a detriment to our downtown. So I think it's really important that we get a vacant building ordinance, and actually I think some would like it to be a much stronger fine than it is. But my understanding was from a legal side, there has to be, the fine has to be tied to something, that we're not allowed just to pick a fine other than the misdemeanor. Would that be correct, that there were some limitations on what we could impose?
A little clarification there, Mayor.
Okay.
The fees that Cliff mentioned, and that what you're talking about, that's the limitation we have, one of the limitations we have, in that our fees have to correspond to the time it takes staff to administer the program. We can't impose a penalty in the form of a fee. And so if we said your building registration fee is $10,000, but it only takes $500 to administer it, that's where we get into that issue. So that's where you tie your cost, is to your registration fee. And then the penalties, that's within Idaho code. The infraction penalty is up to $300, and the misdemeanor penalty is up to 1,006 months. And then it's up to the judge to determine if there was a misdemeanor charge filed within that scope, what they impose as a fine. And then one other point, just to clarify, the requirement to actively market is a requirement. They have to do that. It doesn't exempt them. I want to make sure I wasn't sure from some of the comments. It doesn't exempt them from registration. They still have to register, and they have to actively market the way it's currently written now. There are exemptions to actively marketing if you're under construction and those kind of things that are in there. But both requirements are there. Actively market a commercial building, I should say, and registration.
So my understanding, based on some conversations that we've had, was that actually that what we've put in as the penalties or the guidelines for a vacant building ordinance are not overly onerous. And that it's a direction we need to go as a city to help move our city forward. So personally, I know I may not be popular for this, but I do support the vacant building ordinance as it is stated. The only concern that I have is that it maybe doesn't adequately address a partially occupied building. We could come back and address that at a later time, and also along with the other comments, if we needed to come back with any amendments. I think it would be wise that we go ahead and move forward with the ordinance as it's been presented, and then we can continue to refine it. So that said, did we close the public hearing? We did not. So,
Mayor, I do have one other question, though. Since we're doing residential, although it's supposed to be office, you all recall the building on the corner of Lone Star and Midland. We had a gentleman from out of the state that was going to revitalize that, and so on. Is there? I mean, I realize, is there a time limit when we have a vacant building like that? I mean, he seemed to be ready to go and whatever. It's been sitting for months again. So how does that work? I mean, that was a rezoning. He was going to have put in offices in that building.
that would be the building department, so we would have to.
I'm just curious on that as an example, because I'm sure there's others like that too, but that's been an eyesore for, and when it was even occupied, and it's been unoccupied now for several months. And I haven't seen anything done to it.
Mayor.
Yeah.
And Councilmember Bruner, we'll check on this. You know, permits do expire. And if he has an active permit to do work, it could still be open and things could be okay, even though they're not moving as quickly as we would like. But if the permits have expired, we will check on that.
Okay, thanks. That was just an example, and it's everyone. It's a busy street, and people see that thing all the time. Okay, thanks.
You know, as Councilman Bruner, as you are aware, we do have citizens that are asking us to step up a little bit in enforcement. And that is true. I mean, he's aware, and I'm aware that we do have citizens that are asking us to step up our enforcement, both on the code side and just being a clean city and maintaining our city well.
We want that. There's no one that doesn't want that.
Yes. So with that, we have a public hearing that is currently open. Unless there's any comments for someone, I mean, we can ask staff questions, so I would just stand for a motion to close public hearing at this time.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, where would we like to go at this point?
What you recommended.
Okay,
I
thank you.
would so move.
Okay.
Madam Clerk, you have that one? Okay,
I'll
thanks.
second that.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded that we approve the vacant building ordinance as presented, with a recognition that we will come back and address some of the items that we have discussed this evening, one of which is the partial occupancy of a building, and then as Councilman Reynolds had suggested, maybe some review of some of the language. So there was a motion, a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Pingula.
Yes.
Reynolds.
Yes.
Haverfield.
Yes.
Bauer. Rodriguez. Brunner.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
So then we are going to do the first reading of ordinance, and it is requested to pass under suspension of rules. And so the action item here is to the first reading of ordinance and approval of the publication and ordinance of summary, amending Title IV and adding Chapter 12, providing for the implementation of the vacant building registration permit program with associated fees and fines.
An ordinance of the City of Napa, Idaho, amending Title IV by adding a new Chapter 12 to the Napa City Code pertaining to vacant building registration and maintenance, providing for severability, allowing for a summary of this ordinance to be published, providing for an effective date, and repealing all ordinances, rules, and regulations and parts thereof in conflict with herewith.
Mayor Kling, I'll make the motion to pass the ordinance as read with the summary publication stated and under suspension of rules.
Second.
So it has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Rodriguez. Brunner.
Yes.
Pingula.
Yes.
Bauer. Reynolds.
Yes.
Haverfield.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
That concludes the business of our evening, and I would stand for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded by Natalie. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting